The Human Realm. The Human Realm, by Liu Jiming, translated by Chen. Part 1, continued. Chapter 5. His brother often borrowed books from No.2, and Ma La benefited considerably from this. How the steel was tempered was one of them. The next morning, when Ma La opened his eyes from sleep and saw the dim, damp walls and uneven floor, for an instant, he thought he was still in the prison cell at the labor reform farm. He remained dazed for quite a while before remembering he'd returned to Shenhuangzhou, and having drunk quite a bit of sorghum liquor last night, had fallen asleep in a stupor on Big Bowl Uncle's bed. Big Bowl Uncle had already gone out, and commune member was nowhere to be seen either. The room was utterly quiet, the door left ajar. Bright shafts of light streamed through the door crack and gaps in the roof tiles. The weather had clearly cleared. Ma La had indeed drunk too much last night, and his head still ached faintly. He lay in bed, spacing out for a while longer. The bed was built up with bricks, wide and sturdy, easily able to fit 3 people side by side. In the past, when flood prevention workers were dispatched to the embankment, they all slept on these brick beds. The bedding and sheets were so old their original colors could no longer be distinguished, mottled with stains, patches here, holes there, exposing blackened cotton wadding. This reminded him of a text from elementary school. New for 3 years, old for 3 years, mended and patched for another 3 years. It wasn't much better than the tattered bedding he and Dongsheng had burrowed into back then. These were probably still what the workers had used years ago, Ma La thought. Only the rice straw spread under the sheets was likely from this year's early rice harvest, thick and soft as a sofa, giving off a fragrance familiar to Ma La. Yes, this was authentic early grain straw. Ma La sniffed, his tongue slowly releasing a thread of sweet saliva. When he was young, after the Dragon Boat Festival, when the weather was especially fine, the large and small paddies of Shenhuangzhou would turn golden, the rice swaying in the breeze, the air permeated with the fragrance of ripening early grain. Before dawn, commune members would head to the fields to harvest, too busy to return home. Breakfast had to be delivered to them in the fields by family. Ma La was awakened almost every day by the bang-bang sound of threshing grain. Back then, Mother was still alive. Each time Mother finished making breakfast, she'd fill a large porcelain bowl, then untie her apron and wrap the bowl tightly, having him take it to his brother, Ma Ke. Ma Ke was only 15 or 16 then, already working for the production team. He was tall and strong, and when working could match a full laborer. While his brothers squatted on the field ridge eating, Ma La would sneak over to the threshing barrel, gazing in wonder at the golden grain piled like a small mountain inside, waves of fragrance making his mouth water, drool trickling from the corners of his lips. Ma La got up. While washing, he saw a large bowl filled with cooked sweet potatoes on the stove, covered with a bamboo strainer, clearly Big Bowl Uncle's breakfast preparation for him. Not enough grain, sweet potatoes make up the difference. Ma La still remembered this ditty he'd heard from adults as a child. He hadn't eaten this stuff in many years. Ma La ate several pieces, finding them fragrant, sweet, and especially delicious. Before leaving, he grabbed 2 more pieces in his hand and walked outside. The sky had truly cleared. After the dark clouds dispersed, the sky was like a river channel after flood season. Aside from a few remaining sail-like wisps and cotton-like white clouds, it stretched vast and clean, exceptionally pure. The sun had already risen more than a tree's height. The autumn sunlight was abundant as an energetic youth, blazing like flames, making the trees and grass thickets soaked by rain steam and hiss, radiating the vitality of summer. Yet in Ma La's eyes, this vitality was both wild and vigorous, yet also weak and feeble, like the final rally of an old person who'd suffered greatly, even carrying a bitter, patient, sickly quality. He walked along the muddy, weed-covered path. As far as his eyes could see, the wilderness stretched endlessly, utterly desolate. Not far away was an irregularly shaped wasteland that had apparently been planted with crops 2 years ago. For some unknown reason, the owner had forgotten or abandoned the already mature jute, leaving it to collapse, wither, and rot in the wind and rain, giving off the smell of rotting, stinking vegetation. The exposed earth was like a sick person's failing organs, black with a tinge of yellow, merging with the surrounding weeds and shrubs into an indistinguishable mass. On a nearby slope stood 3 paulownia trees with sparse branches but unusually tall, straight trunks. They faced the poplar grove below the river embankment from afar, like warriors who'd won the final victory in a war and survivors of catastrophe, displaying an air of aloof independence, looking down on everything. Mala squinted slightly, gazing at those 3 paulownia trees, feeling as if he stood on an ancient wilderness, as if time had reversed, something deep in his heart subtly touched. These trees with smooth bark but very coarse wood grew faster than ordinary trees, and the poorer the soil, the faster and more robustly they grew. In Shenhuangzhou, they were usually considered worthless, not even fit for making coffins, only good for firewood. But Ma La remembered that when Mother died of illness and there was no money to buy quality lumber, they'd had to use paulownia trees from production team pigpen railings to make her coffin for burial. And after his brother was burned to death in the fire, it was Big Bowl Uncle who'd led several people to chop down a paulownia tree at the village entrance thick enough for 2 people to encircle, working through the night to make a coffin to lay him to rest. Paulownia trees. Ma La sighed softly in his heart. His thoughts drifted for a moment, making his steps hesitant and heavy, as if stuck in the mud at his feet. Each forward step required double the effort, like a city dweller who rarely traveled far, suddenly arriving in the wilderness, his unfamiliar surroundings stirring melancholy. This feeling was clearly written on Ma La's angular face, laying bare the storm within his heart. The 7 years Ma La spent at the labor reform farm truly taught him the meaning of days passing like years. During the first 2 years, Ma La was locked up with a group of thieves, robbers, and rapists, eating, living, and working alongside them. Probably because they'd heard Ma La had been a company general manager sentenced for smuggling, they treated him as a rich man and an object for venting their hatred. They found every way to exploit and humiliate him, making him sleep by the urine bucket at night, forcing him to empty it daily. At mealtimes, they'd offer the extra portions of meat and fish to the cell boss. They stopped just short of sodomizing him. If he showed the slightest resistance, behind the guards' backs, that bunch would viciously abuse him, cruel as demons from hell. Later, when the cell boss learned he'd been an orphan since childhood, and seeing that after nearly 2 years in prison he hadn't had a single visitor, he took pity on him. Ma La's days became slightly more bearable. Ma La didn't know how he'd endured that period. Several times he felt he really couldn't take it anymore and truly wanted to end it all. He'd designed methods of suicide countless times, deliberately breaking his rice bowl during meals, secretly bringing ceramic shards back to his cell, cutting his wrists at night after others fell asleep, while working in the fields and crossing the road, suddenly breaking from formation and throwing himself at an oncoming vehicle, secretly hoarding the rat poison distributed to each cell by the guards until he'd accumulated a lethal dose, then taking it, or during bathroom breaks in daytime, using his belt to hang himself. He'd even meticulously planned each method, not overlooking any detail, fully considering any unfavorable factors that might lead to failure. His thoroughness was no less than when he and Teacher Liu had conducted market analyses in E-City. Especially at night, though his body was exhausted from a day's labor, his nervous system became unusually active, his mind teeming with illusions. Scenes of suicide came one after another, as if he were sinking into a swamp, finding it increasingly impossible to extricate himself. This was the period in Ma La's life when he'd been most intimate with death. Ever since his parents and brother died successively, death had hung over Ma La's entire childhood like an enormous net, making him like a helpless, isolated fish living constantly under death's shadow. This became the most direct factor in forming Ma La's melancholy temperament. The entire purpose of his life seemed to be breaking free from this net that had consecutively claimed his 3 family members. Cruel, gloomy, terrifying. This was Ma La's earliest understanding of death. From the day he learned to hate, he'd regarded death as his mortal enemy. But this enemy was so powerful that Ma La knew he stood no chance against it. The disparity between them was simply too great, so that he felt the only way to defeat his opponent was mutual destruction. This was both a desperate struggle and a final reconciliation between enemies. Generally speaking, this progression from fear and hatred of death to reconciliation only happens when people reach old age. Yet it had occurred in Ma La's mind while he was still in childhood and adolescence. But he was, after all, just a child, which meant this reconciliation could only become a sort of illusion in his life, possessing the ethereal, insubstantial quality of witchcraft and fairy tales. When father died, Ma La was still young and had no recollection of it. When mother died, he'd already begun to understand things. Mother died in an accident. That winter, Ma La and his brother Ma Ke huddled around a fire of tree stumps, warming themselves while waiting for mother to return home as usual. Outside, the cold wind howled and all was pitch black. On that very night, returning home from sewing clothes for someone, mother fell from the wooden bridge at the village entrance into the irrigation ditch. The ice-cold water quickly froze mother's limbs and froze the cry for help that hadn't yet left her mouth. In the dead of night, when Big Bowl Uncle led the brothers Ma Ke and Ma La to fish mother from the village entrance ditch, she still gripped tightly in her hand the scissors and measuring tape she carried every day. Ma Ke and Ma La were not yet adults, so Big Bowl Uncle handled all of mother's funeral arrangements. The village held a solemn memorial service for her. The eulogy was drafted by Ma Ke, who had only an elementary education. Ma La only remembered one line. The death of Tailor Yao has caused the villagers of Shenhuangzhou to lose a good tailor, and has caused the brothers Ma Ke and Ma La to lose a good mother. Alas, the sorrow. May she rest in peace. Upon hearing that last line, the brothers Ma Ke and Ma La, kneeling in mourning clothes before mother's coffin, wept uncontrollably. When Ma La was 14, his brother Ma Ke was burned to death in a sudden fire. For many days afterward, he wandered near the production team warehouse that had been reduced to ruins. The great fire that had dyed half the sky red seemed still to burn fiercely, and in his ears rang the wails of adults and children. When the fire broke out, Ma Ke was attending music class at the Brigade Elementary School. The sent-down youth No.2 was teaching them the new song, Socialism is Good. Guo Dongsheng, who was often late or absent, suddenly appeared at the classroom door drenched in sweat, not even bothering to wipe it as he shouted, Ma La! The 4th team warehouse is on fire. Your brother Hearing this, Ma La froze, not yet fully comprehending, when he saw No.2, who'd been copying lyrics on the blackboard, drop her chalk. It fell to the floor and broke into several pieces with a snap. When Ma La and No.2 rushed to the 4th team warehouse, they saw Ma Ke burned black as charcoal. Later, Big Bowl Uncle said his brother Ma Ke, ignoring people's attempts to stop him, had rushed headlong into the warehouse already engulfed in flames and carried out several bags of rice seed, his entire body becoming a moving ball of fire. Your brother sacrificed himself rescuing collective seed. The County Revolutionary Committee posthumously recognized him as a martyr and called on young workers and peasants throughout the county to learn from him. Big Bowl Uncle's words made Ma La think of heroes like Chu Shaoyun, Wang Jie, and Jin Shunhua, but didn't lessen the grief in his heart. His brother's death left him bereft of his last family member in this world. He became a true orphan. Once again, Ma La felt death's terrifying power. Many years later, when Ma La encountered death again face to face through Teacher Liu, he suddenly gained a completely different understanding. Death is never a person's opponent. They are twin brothers, or rather, it is the only reason for a person to live. This was perhaps the important revelation Teacher Liu's death gave him. It was also the beginning of his reconciliation with death. In fact, during those days when Ma La felt utterly desperate and lonely, Teacher Liu's ghost had visited his dreams more than once. Those earnest, intimate conversations seemed even more vivid and passionate than when Teacher Liu was alive, so that Ma La wondered whether Teacher Liu had truly died. He even had an illusion. As one of the principal culprits in a nationally shocking automobile smuggling case, Teacher Liu had merely fled to a place beyond the law's reach, where all worldly rules were abolished and he'd gained true freedom. Ma La felt this might be a reasonable explanation for his current status as a prisoner. Realizing this, he experienced a feeling of abandonment, the hidden pain he'd repeatedly felt after losing family members as a child. But at the same time, he felt some consolation, even a tragic sense of voluntarily ascending the altar of sacrifice that he'd been able to accept and bear alone the burden from Teacher Liu's shoulders before he left this world. This ultimately became the real reason Ma La found to keep living. But the enormous void and loneliness that losing his intimate mentor had left in his life wasn't eliminated. Rather, it gnawed at his heart like a giant beast. In his mind floated a line from Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra that he'd read while studying at Yanhei Normal School. "O solitude, you are my home, solitude. I have lived too long wild and strange in wild, strange lands not to return home to you with tears. Now just threaten me with your finger as mothers threaten. Now just smile at me as mothers smile. Now just say to me, who was it that once stormed away from me like a tempest?" Yes, stormed away like a tempest. Hadn't Teacher Liu blown into his life like a sudden wind, then suddenly departed? Later, when Ma La was transferred to work as librarian at the farm library, spending all day dealing with yellowed, dust-covered books, he felt like a wanderer who'd roamed for many years, finally embarking on the journey home. The farm library was broken down and old, its collection pitifully small, not only due to lack of funds, but also because previous librarians hadn't kept pace with the times. Most of the collection consisted of Revolutionary War novels published before the smashing of the Gang of Four, and of course plenty of works by Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao for the political education of reform through labor prisoners. Interestingly, though these books were old and outdated, they were preserved in perfect condition. Some looked almost new, not only rarely damaged, but without even a folded page or smudge. Ma La was secretly puzzled, but when sorting through borrowing cards, he discovered that some of the library's collection had never been borrowed even once. No wonder they looked so new. Ma La realized this library, specially established for prisoners, had essentially no patrons. In other words, the library was purely window dressing to satisfy inspections from above. Ma La found this deeply regrettable, thinking what a waste of these books. However, this gave him a rare opportunity to read. He discovered Anna Karenina and how the steel was tempered in a pile of old books the previous librarian had nearly discarded as waste. Ma La had read Anna Karenina while studying at Yanhei Normal School, even the same edition, the 1979 Shanghai Translation Publishing House version with a green cover, 2 volumes. As for how the steel was tempered, that went without saying. He'd first read this Soviet novel in elementary school. The music teacher Mu Rongqiu was a sent-down youth from Wuhan. His brother said when she came to Shenhuangzhou, she'd brought a whole trunk full of books. His brother often borrowed books from Mu Rongqiu, and Ma La benefited considerably from this. How the steel was tempered was one of them. The farm library was silent as a tomb all day long, as quiet as a remote mountain monastery. It was in this environment that Ma La reread Anna Karenina and How the Steel Was Tempered. Initially, Ma La was just trying to pass the suddenly abundant time, but as his reading deepened, he entered another world entirely, a long-vanished world. Ma La discovered that after so many years, having transformed from an introverted, sentimental youth into a middle-aged man who'd experienced many ups and downs, He now had completely different understandings and feelings about these two novels he'd once read. For instance, when first reading Anna Karenina, Ma La had been most interested in the romantic entanglement between Anna and Vronsky. Passion and coldness, infatuation and falsity, loyalty and betrayal. Now, his reading focus had clearly shifted from Anna to Levin, whom he'd previously overlooked as a minor character. Levin's honest, practical character, his distaste for Moscow aristocratic life, the series of reforms he implemented on his estate, and his lying on a haystack pondering seemingly impractical, profound questions about why people live and what kind of life is meaningful. All of this produced an unprecedented attraction for Ma La. He came to deeply appreciate this character Tolstoy had portrayed as somewhat eccentric and antisocial. As for how the steel was tempered, Ma La also had an entirely new reading experience. Previously, he'd always felt Pavel Korchagin was a fearless, selfless proletarian revolutionary fighter. The heroic dream of becoming Pavel had permeated his entire youth, and shaping this youthful heroic dream was undoubtedly a batch of revolutionary novels represented by how the steel was tempered. In Ma La's eyes, Tanya reeked of bourgeois young lady pretension, and Pavel's rebuke of Tanya and her husband at the construction site was so satisfying. By comparison, the beautiful, brave Komsomol cadre Rita was the revolutionary companion worthy of Pavel. Therefore, when the novel described Pavel pulling a gun at the train station to threaten the rowdy crowd trying to board, that little hooligan style, Ma La thought it was incredibly cool. However, years later, in the crude, empty library of the labor reform farm, when Ma La reopened How the Steel Was Tempered, his eyes hurriedly skipped over Pavel's experiences as a revolutionary baptized by blood and fire, settling on the latter half where he suffered from serious illness and recuperated at a sanatorium. Pavel sitting on a bench at the seaside sanatorium, immersed in memories of those tumultuous years with an undying heroic spirit, and that passage about life. Man's dearest possession is life. It is given to him but once, and he must live it so as to feel no torturing regrets for wasted years, never know the burning shame of a mean and petty past. So live that, dying, he might say. All my life, all my strength were given to the finest cause in all the world, the fight for the liberation of mankind. Man must live life to the fullest, because sudden illness or tragic accident could end his life at any moment. Ma La suddenly gained a more genuine understanding of the death that had long plagued him. At this very moment, Ma La realized he was no longer young. Of course, perhaps more importantly, that red spiritual background that had accompanied his youth no longer existed. Ma La spent his 38th birthday at the labor reform farm. Even by Dante's division, this age marked a man's entry into middle age. He felt it necessary to re-examine the path he'd traveled and contemplate how to live the latter half of his life. For him, this was truly a severe question. Staying in the labor reform farm library, Ma La often spent long periods neither organizing the collection nor reading. He'd just sit there, his gaze fixedly staring at some spot, as if possessed. During this time, he developed an urge to write. However, he was no longer obsessed with the writer's dream as before, but felt his heart was filled with too much expressive impulse. He first wrote some scattered poems. These poems were completely different from the youthful sentimentality and rich romantic sentiment of his normal school days, instead radiating the contemplative beauty of someone who'd seen the vicissitudes of life and penetrated worldly affairs. He even wanted to write a book about homeland and memory, fantasy and reality. But Ma La had barely started when he was transferred from the library and replaced by a reform cadre's family member. Leaving the library, Ma La returned to the prisoners' midst, but he didn't participate in high-intensity field labor. Instead, he was assigned to the farm orchard. The labor reform farm's orchard was quite large, covering over 100 mu, with not only citrus, apples, and plums, but also kiwi fruit, still uncommon in the market. This ugly-looking fruit was supposedly introduced from New Zealand and required relatively advanced cultivation techniques. The reform team cadres, probably considering Ma La's former identity as an intellectual and entrepreneur, had him work with several prisoners experienced in fruit tree cultivation to grow kiwi fruit. His former teaching career and entrepreneurial identity had given Ma La the habit of treating everything seriously, meticulously, and conscientiously. Before long, he'd gained deep, detailed knowledge of kiwi fruit's characteristics. Kiwi fruit was also called changchu, monkey pear, woodberry, yang peach, sun peach, vine pear, lianchu, two-dimensional fruit, fuzzy fruit, plus the latest Jiangzhen brands Xunyang and Hongyang. Americans called it gooseberry. The British called it Chinese gooseberry. The Japanese called it Chinese monkey pear. Through consulting materials, he was surprised to discover that kiwi fruit didn't originate in New Zealand as commonly believed. Its ancestral home was actually China. Over 100 years ago, a New Zealand female principal traveling in China discovered kiwi fruit and brought it back to New Zealand, beginning its immigrant life. After improvement, the kiwi fruit called kiwi gained international fame, then returned en masse to China with prices several times higher than Chinese kiwi fruit. Supposedly, kiwi fruit flesh was green as jade, fragrant and inviting. It tasted sweet with a touch of sour, extremely delicious, with the reputation of vitamin C king. Its nutritional value was extremely high, and in recent years it had become very popular in the Chinese market. After a period of study, Ma La skillfully mastered kiwi fruit cultivation techniques. Under his careful tending, within 2 years, the kiwi fruit trees bore their first harvest. That year, the labor reform farm's various fruits had a bumper harvest, including the most difficult-to-tend kiwi fruit. Ma La was also named a technical expert and received a 1-year sentence reduction. Just then, Ma La welcomed the first visitor to the farm. This person was his old classmate, Ding Yupeng. When Ma La saw Ding Yupeng walk into the crude visitation room accompanied by a farm leader, he couldn't help being startled. For a moment, he couldn't react. Several years of prison life had made his thinking somewhat slow. Later, when the farm leader politely let Deputy County Magistrate Ding stay alone with him for a while and left the visitation room, he still couldn't find appropriate words to say for a long time. Ding Yupeng clearly was no longer the Deputy Section Chief of Yanhe County Education Committee's General Education Section. Dressed in a suit, he seemed to have gained weight compared to before. His face tilted slightly upward, his back ramrod straight, every gesture quite befitting a deputy county magistrate. Only after the farm leader left the visitation room did Ding Yupeng completely drop his deputy county magistrate airs and come over to shake hands with Ma La. When Ma La grasped those fair hands, they felt soft and limp, somewhat like a woman's. "I heard about your situation long ago and always wanted to visit, but could never find the opportunity." Ding Yupeng looked Ma La over, carefully choosing his words. "This time I had business at the Provincial Reform Bureau and took the opportunity to see you." Seeing Ma La remain silent, he continued. "Over a decade has passed in a flash. We've both reached middle age. Ma La, these past 2 years I've often recalled our days studying at normal school. You were always holding philosophy and literature books thicker than bricks, your head full of strange ideas. I figured even if you didn't become a philosopher, you'd at least be a writer or something. But I never imagined you'd follow Teacher Liu down that path." At this point, Ding Yupeng's face showed an expression of deep regret. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes, extracted one, and waved it at him. "You still don't smoke, right?" Without waiting for Ma La's answer, he stuck the cigarette in his mouth and lit it with a lighter, slowly taking a drag. "Recently, I've been studying for a graduate degree at W University. I heard a professor lecturing. He called people like you and Teacher Liu in that first batch who plunged into the sea of commerce the first generation of trailblazers born from reform and opening up, saying they played a pivotal role in China's economic development, their contributions considerable. He used extensive data to prove this generation now occupies quite important positions in the current market landscape. Many CEOs of well-known domestic and international companies were from that same generation of trailblazers who went into business around the same time as you. Of course, some had bad luck and were eliminated midway, like you and Teacher Liu. As Ding Yuping spoke, he probably realized his words might wound Ma La's pride and suddenly stopped. Ma La listened expressionlessly throughout. Now, seeing Ding Yuping fall silent, he looked at him with surprise, as if expecting him to continue. "Give me a cigarette," Ma La suddenly said. Ding Yuping's words had clearly touched Ma La. He recalled a film he'd seen many years ago, The Waves Wash the Sand. During the revolutionary tide of the early 20th century, a group of intimate young people who'd experienced the May 4th movement were swept into the era's torrent. Each had to make their own choices. They underwent severe trials and temptations of interest. Some became like-minded comrades or lovers, others became mortal enemies. Youth, faith, loyalty, betrayal. The idealistic atmosphere pervading the film had once made Ma La's blood boil with excitement. Now, facing his old classmate Ding Yuping, a strange thought suddenly popped into Ma La's mind. If the two of them were placed in that film, what roles would he and Ding Yuping each be playing? At noon, Ding Yuping treated Ma La to a meal at the Labor Reform Farm's staff cafeteria. During the meal, they talked about Teacher Liu. "When I heard the news of Teacher Liu's death, I couldn't sleep well for days. What an outstanding man. Though he failed in business, he could still be considered a hero," Ding Yuping said with the solemn expression of someone at a memorial service. As Yanhe County's first private entrepreneur, Teacher Liu made contributions to the county's development. Some people are alive, yet they are dead. Some people are dead, yet they still live. Recently, when our county was revising the county annals, I even suggested writing Teacher Liu into the Yanhe County Gallery of Notable Figures. Though Ding Yuping's speaking style was like giving a report at a meeting, somewhat exaggerated, his expression seemed quite sincere. Apparently, he hadn't harbored lasting resentment about Teacher Liu's refusal to donate to the county education committee back then. After all, we were both Liu Yongjia's students. Both received intellectual enlightenment from Teacher Liu, Ma La thought. The sense of estrangement that time and different life experiences had created between him and Ding Yuping seemed to diminish considerably. However, no one is perfect. No gold is pure. Ding Yuping sighed. Our Teacher Liu also had weaknesses, made some mistakes, even quite serious ones. Even Chairman Mao made mistakes. How could Teacher Liu be an exception? As his students, we can't cover up for our elders. Ma La detected implications in Ding Yuping's words. Thinking he was still referring to the smuggling case, he said nothing. But the other party suddenly lowered his voice and asked, "Do you still remember that woman whose belly Teacher Liu got big?" Ma La looked at Ding Yuping hesitantly, not understanding why he suddenly brought this up. Wasn't she a performer from the county arts troupe? She wasn't just any performer. Her name was Tang Lina. She played Shire in the dance drama The White-Haired Girl. Ding Yuping smiled mysteriously. But more importantly, her father was a recently retired deputy county-level cadre, a comrade in arms who went south with my father during liberation. When father and daughter complained to the county party secretary, Teacher Liu couldn't escape. Considering he was the normal school's star teacher, the county didn't dismiss him from public employment, but only ordered him to resign. They left him some face. "So that's how it was?" Ma La murmured, still somewhat skeptical. But Ding Yuping spoke with such detail it didn't seem like a made-up story. How did I not know any of this? If you'd known, how could you have so wholeheartedly resigned and gone into business with Teacher Liu? Ding Yuping's words carried a hint of mockery. "I want to know, was the child born?" Ma La suddenly asked. Ding Yuping hesitated before saying, "She was born, a girl. I heard she looks a lot like Teacher Liu, but unfortunately the child never saw her own father." Ma La made a thoughtful sound of acknowledgement. Before leaving, Ding Yuping patted Ma La's shoulder like a leader with a subordinate, saying in an encouraging tone, "At normal school, your thinking was always more profound than mine. You read more books and were more learned than me. I don't need to say much else. Just grit your teeth and persevere a bit longer. I heard you got a year's sentence reduction. The rest will pass in a flash. After you get out, if there's anything you need my help with, just come find me. After all, we're old classmates." Ding Yuping's tone was full of sympathy. "After all, to a large extent you took the blame for someone else. You went to prison for Teacher Liu." Hearing this, Ma La couldn't help feeling somewhat moved. The following year, when Ma La's reform through labor life entered its 7th year, he was finally released. Before his release, Ma La sought out the reform cadre who'd once looked after him and selected some old books from the library that had essentially been sitting idle, including Anna Karenina and How the Steel Was Tempered. They filled nearly an entire trunk. The first thing Ma La did after leaving the labor reform farm was go to E-City to handle Teacher Liu's ashes, fulfilling this long-held wish. Circumstances at the time hadn't allowed Ma La to handle this matter properly, so Teacher Liu's ashes had been temporarily stored at the funeral home. And the last matter Teacher Liu had mentioned before his death was hoping Ma La could scatter his ashes. "I have no descendants, and my hometown relatives never enjoyed any benefits from me, so I don't want to burden them with visiting my grave every year. So let me disappear from this world cleanly and completely," Teacher Liu had said with philosophical detachment. "Scatter them anywhere. Just don't leave a grave or tombstone." After so many years, stepping onto E-City's streets again gave Ma La a feeling of being utterly displaced in time. When E-City first established its special zone, the entire city had barely any high-rise buildings. But today's E-City was filled with skyscrapers, each more magnificent than the last, full of modern grandeur. Walking among the densely packed buildings, people felt like they were in a mountain gorge. Cars flowed like water in an endless stream, yet pedestrians were few and far between, in stark contrast to the streets once crowded with job seekers. Meeting Ma La's eyes were younger, more vigorous faces. This made Ma La realize that to this city, he'd become a complete stranger. Ma La went to great lengths to track down several former subordinates from Kunpeng Company. Initially, due to Teacher Liu's sudden death and Ma La's imprisonment, Kunpeng Company had collapsed. Company employees had no choice but to scatter and seek their own fortunes. One named Hao Jian had been personally recruited into Kunpeng Company by Ma La. After some years of ups and downs in the business world, this tall, thin college graduate from Anhui, who always blushed when speaking, looked much more mature than before. He now ran a comprehensive chain of restaurants with several branches, business booming. His every gesture resembled a respectable businessman. However, unlike several other former subordinates who'd been aloof toward their former boss, Hao Jian personally arranged for Ma La to stay at E-City's most luxurious 5-star hotel upon meeting him. He not only treated him to a seafood feast costing several thousand yuan, but also arranged sauna and Thai massage, saying it would loosen his muscles and bones. Ma La politely declined Hao Jian's abundant hospitality. In the end, he could only invite Ma La to famous Wanghai Tower Tea House for evening tea. In a tea room decorated in South Asian style, Hao Jian spoke of Kunpeng Company's chairman Liu Yongjia in reminiscent, regretful tones. If Chairman Liu hadn't fallen ill, if Kunpeng Company hadn't been drawn into that smuggling case, Hao Jian's mouth frequently produced such hypothetical statements. Ma La could actually hear another layer of meaning. If not for all this, he himself wouldn't be where he was today. He might still be working for Kunpeng Company. Hao Jian was an exceptionally shrewd young man. Back then, Ma La had seen just this quality in him, and within 2 years of joining Kunpeng Company had promoted him to marketing director. Hao Jian clearly remembered Ma La's appreciation and cultivation of him. What are General Manager Ma's plans going forward? To rebuild Kunpeng Company's glory can only depend on you. If you need my help, just say the word. Hao Jian's words reminded Ma La of what Teacher Liu had said before his death, gripping his hand. The revolution is not yet complete. Comrades must still strive. In the future, it can only depend on you. He smiled bitterly to himself. Perhaps Ding Yuping was right, he thought. I was never cut out for business. If not for Teacher Liu back then, perhaps by now I really would have applied for graduate school and become a scholar. Let me think it over some more, Ma La said evasively. A few days later, Ma La left E-City quietly without saying goodbye to Hao Jian. On the train back to Yanhe County, he scattered part of Teacher Liu's ashes along the railway line. Years ago, he and Teacher Liu had taken this very railway to E-City to start their enterprise. The other part of Teacher Liu's ashes he planned to take back to his hometown. Ma La believed that if Teacher Liu knew beneath the earth, he certainly wouldn't object. Chapter 6. At that moment, the beliefs that had been so deeply rooted in his mind began to waver. For several days in a row, Ma La wandered and drifted through Shenhuangzhou's desolate wilderness and along the banks of the Jingjiang that wound around the sandbar like a ghost lost in confusion. His mind overgrown with weeds, churning with sediment and chaos, many long-sealed memories surged forth like a thawing river, rushing left and right through the channels of his recollection. Beside an abandoned, dilapidated brick kiln by the river, Ma La stood among moss-covered broken bricks and tiles, gazing for a long time at the river water at his feet, his eyes involuntarily growing sore. For so many years, whenever Ma La thought of his brother Ma Ke who'd perished in the fire, his heart would ache faintly. After graduating from higher elementary school, his brother had returned to farm in the village. When working for the production team, he always took the lead and worked tirelessly without complaint, earning considerable respect from production team leader Big Bowl Uncle. His brother was not only outstanding at labor but also loved reading. Every evening when he had time, he'd hold a book under the kerosene lamp and read late into the night. Ma La, just starting elementary school and barely literate, often pestered him to tell stories. From his brother, Ma La first heard about Shu Yunfeng, Sister Jiang, and Cheng Gong from Red Crag, about Yang Zirong and Xiao Jianbo from tracks in the snowy forest, about the stories of Zoya and Shura, and about little soldier Zhang Ga and Wang Erxiao. His brother was truly a master storyteller. He brought those people and events from distant war years to vivid, lifelike reality, making Ma La feel for a long time that he lived among those characters. Later, a group of sent-down youth came from the provincial capital Wuhan and Yanhe County seat to settle in Shenhuangzhou. By then, Brother Ma Ke had already become the brigade's Youth League branch secretary. Under his organization, the sent-down youth established a cultural propaganda team called Ulan Mukir, frequently performing for commune members in the fields. Wuhan female sent-down youth, Murong Qiu's solo, Yiming folk song, and Yanhe male sent-down youth Li Haijun's bamboo flute solo, whipping the horse to hasten the grain transport, were regular numbers at every performance. Occasionally, Brother Ma Ke would personally perform a section from the model opera The Red Lantern, Li Yuhei's aria, Nothing in the World Can Stump a Communist, winning applause from commune members and sent-down youth alike. Before long, Murong Qiu became a music teacher at the Brigade Elementary School. Whether because Murong Qiu was beautiful or because his brother often borrowed books from her to read at home, Ma La felt an inexplicable closeness to her. He often returned books to Murong Qiu for his brother, or after school, Murong Qiu would hand him a new book to take to his brother. He'd practically become their courier. Ma La was naturally happy to perform this duty. Each time he received his assignment, like the little anti-Japanese heroes Wang Erxiao and Yu Lai, he felt waves of excitement and agitation. Gradually, Ma La developed feelings toward Murong Qiu similar to those between siblings. Sometimes when meeting her outside school, Ma La would call her Sister Murong rather than Teacher Murong. Murong Qiu seemed to like this form of address too, responding with a happy, "Yes," and affectionately patting his head. At such moments, Ma La would catch a faint, delicate fragrance from Murong Qiu, like the scent of wild grass on the riverbank beach. It was the smell of face cream. City girls all liked using it. Once, when his brother returned from attending a Communist Youth League cadre meeting at Yanhe County seat, he gave Ma La a small box to deliver to Murong Qiu when returning books, instructing him not to let anyone else know. On the way to school, Ma La still couldn't resist his curiosity and secretly opened it for a look. It was a box of face cream. When Ma La arrived at school and handed the small box to No.2, a blush swept across her face. If not for that fire, what would the outcome have been for his brother and sister No.? This thought flashed through Ma La's mind, and his heart suddenly ached like an old wound being reopened. He couldn't help but moan softly, "My brother." The autumn Jingjiang ran calm, shallow, and thin, like an idle bow, but Ma La's heart blazed with towering flames, just like that sweltering summer afternoon over 20 years ago. From his earliest memories, his brother had occupied a special position in his mind, serving as a life mentor like a father. Ma La had never seen Father, yet he always felt he'd found Father's shadow in his brother. This imagined father was tall and heroic, hard-working and resilient, steady and calm, full of wisdom, practically a mythical figure. For a time, Ma La would quietly observe his brother, secretly imitating his every move. Over time, Ma La's manner of speaking and acting increasingly resembled Ma Kei's. Once in class, when the teacher asked students, "Who do you admire most?" many classmates answered they admired Chairman Mao or other great figures. Ma La answered, "I admire my brother most." He'd never imagined his brother would one day suddenly leave him and this world, just as he'd never believed Chairman Mao could die. So when his brother vanished abruptly in that towering fire on that unbearably hot summer afternoon, an enormous void appeared in Ma La's heart. He always felt his brother's death was related to him. Perhaps it was his own too eager hope for his brother to become a hero that caused his death. His brother fulfilled his youthful dream but left him forever. For many years afterward, he constantly felt desolate, empty, pained, and guilty, becoming even more introverted. Like lacking oxygen and suffering malnutrition, his physical development seemed to lag far behind his peers. This condition persisted until Ma La was admitted to Yanhei Normal School and met Teacher Liu. Teacher Liu was undoubtedly another life mentor Ma La encountered after losing his brother. With Teacher Liu, Ma La achieved the transformation from an ignorant youth to a modern young intellectual with independent consciousness. He was no longer that little red guard whose head was full of revolutionary hero complexes, but had become one of the new generation of the 1980s who believed in Bacon's maxim that knowledge is power and advocated individual struggle. In his mind, his brother gradually became an increasingly blurred background, while Teacher Liu's image as Enlightenment mentor grew daily taller, until it completely replaced the position his brother once occupied in his heart. This was why Teacher Liu's death had such a tremendous impact on him. He felt that all these years he'd been like a kite Teacher Liu had released into flight. Though it seemed to fly far and high, someone had always been correcting and directing its course. That person was Teacher Liu. When Teacher Liu died, he, the kite, became like one with a broken string, swaying and wobbling, not knowing where it would drift. Now this kite with a broken string had finally returned to its homeland. In any case, he should go pay respects at Mother's and his brother's graves, Ma La thought. Mother's grave was in the burial ground at the village's west end. When she was buried, there hadn't even been a tombstone. Ma La had great difficulty finding Mother's grave among the large expanse of burial mounds. All around grew mugwort and reeds, with holes dug by rats and badgers. It looked utterly desolate. Following Shenhuangzhou custom, Ma La burned a stack of paper money and a stick of incense for Mother, then kowtowed 3 times. Through tear-blurred eyes, Ma La dimly saw Mother leading his brother and his young self as they drifted all the way from Dongting Lake to settle in Shenhuangzhou. Those were years of frequent disasters and widespread famine. People often couldn't even fill their bellies. Where would they find energy to make new clothes? When Mother couldn't find tailoring work, the family of 3 had to go hungry. Sometimes they went a whole day without a grain of rice, so famished they saw stars, unable even to stand, let alone walk. It was under such circumstances that Mother and her 2 sons drifted to Shenhuangzhou. At the time, Shenhuangzhou hadn't fully emerged from famine either, but people still generously took in Mother and the two brothers. After Ma La became somewhat aware, he heard Mother say more than once, "If not for Shen Huangzhou, we three might have starved to death long ago." Mother was someone who knew gratitude. In the days that followed, whenever she went to someone's house to sew clothes, Mother was always meticulous, not daring to be careless in the slightest, always thinking of the family's interests, unwilling to waste even the smallest scrap of fabric. When Ma La's forehead touched the earth before Mother's grave, his nose stung sharply. Mother rested eternally in Shen Huangzhou, as did his brother. They had done right by this land, he thought. Brother Ma Kei's grave was located not far from the river embankment, beside a grove of dawn redwoods. After more than 20 years of wind and rain erosion, the originally high mound had lowered considerably. The characters on the tombstone were blurred and illegible. Ma La carefully brushed away the grime with his fingers before he could make out the text. Tomb of Martyr Ma Kei, who sacrificed himself, rescuing collective property. Ma La's gaze rested on the line. Erected July 23, 1976. Not long after his brother's burial, the school had organized newly admitted young pioneers to march in neat formation to his brother's grave for a swearing-in ceremony. Ma La had been one of those new young pioneers. Leading their oath was music teacher No.2, who by then had already replaced his brother as Brigade Youth League branch secretary. Taking over No.2's music teaching position was the local male sent-down youth from Yanhe County, Li Haijun. Ma La remembered that day it had drizzled. The fine rain wetted No.2's hair. Water trickled bit by bit down her lovely forehead and face. She stood at the front of the formation, facing his brother's grave, raising her fist to lead everyone in the oath. Brother Ma Kei heroically sacrificed himself rescuing collective property. His death is weightier than Mount Tai. We must learn from his fearless spirit, study hard, love our motherland, love labor, and when we grow up become successors to the socialist cause. In the misty rain, No.2's raised fist trembled slightly. When the oath ended and she turned around, Ma La saw moisture at the corners of her eyes. Was it rain or tears? At that moment, Ma La knew Sister Murong loved his brother just as he did. He really wanted to throw himself into Sister Murong's arms and cry. That afternoon, Ma La stayed at his brother's grave for a long time. His mind was like an irrigation ditch whose gates had opened. Sediment rose up, mud and sand rushed together, the past swept by like floating clouds. The questions that had plagued him at the labor reform farm began plaguing him again. Life, death, love, hate, loyalty, betrayal, history, individual, collective, these fragmented words and phrases, like shards of history, constantly knocked at the gates of his heart. Ma La recalled when studying at Yanhe Normal School, he and literary society classmates had discussed the Panjiao letter published in China Youth Daily. Why does life's path grow ever narrower? When Ding Yupeng spoke, he thoroughly disparaged the Lei Feng spirit. Since people living are subjectively for themselves and objectively for others, the Lei Feng spirit is worthless. In a society that elevates the individual above the collective, collectivist concepts are simply laughable. Ding Yupeng's words won unanimous agreement from classmates. Ma La had wanted to refute Ding Yupeng's views, but he hesitated and remained silent. He thought of a long string of heroic names he'd worshipped as a child, including his brother Ma Kei. At that moment, the beliefs that had been so deeply rooted in his mind began to waver. All day long, Ma La added earth to Mother's and his brother's graves. Now, his brother's grave mound had an additional earthen hillock. Below lay the other half of Teacher Lu's ashes. Sitting beside the newly raised mound, Ma La lit a cigarette. Through the drifting smoke, he seemed to see his brother and Teacher Lu again. These two people who'd originally never known each other and were completely different, now keeping each other company. Ma La felt somewhat uneasy, a strange thought popping into his mind. Would they often quarrel? Thinking this, he seemed to actually see Teacher Lu and his brother engaged in heated verbal combat. Teacher Liu pointed at his brother and said, "For that bit of seed you wasted your precious life, so not worth it." His brother asked impolitely, "According to you then, those revolutionary martyrs who sacrificed themselves for New China, that wasn't worth it either? Lei Feng, Wu Yanghai, Wang Jie, they weren't worth it either?" Teacher Liu sighed and said, "In any case, life comes but once to a person, or rather, is a person's most basic right. No great goal can deprive them of this right." "That's thoroughly selfish philosophy and a bourgeois outlook on life." His brother's sword-like brows furrowed habitually, his characteristic expression when angry. "Remember what Pavel said? When you look back on your life, you won't regret wasting your years in mediocrity. Every man for himself, or heaven and earth will destroy him. Even illiterates understand this principle, yet you turn a blind eye to it. You've been poisoned too deeply by that radical ideology." Teacher Liu shrugged, gazing at his brother with pity. "My friend, haven't you considered that in all these years since your sacrifice, aside from some initial excitement, your grave has been cold and deserted these decades? How many people still remember you? Don't you know that you and those so-called heroes you worship are outdated, have become worthless?" A gust of wind blew from the distant fields, stirring up the dust and dead branches and leaves before the grave, making everything appear gray and hazy. A speck of dust blew into Ma La's eye. He rubbed it a few times. The debate between Teacher Liu and his brother still rang in his ears. This was actually what Teacher Liu had said when participating in literary society discussions back at normal school. Ma La felt that all these years, Teacher Liu's words had always occupied his mind. The argument between his brother and Teacher Liu just now had actually occurred countless times in his own brain. At this moment, sitting at his brother Ma Kei's grave, Ma La was once again seized by intense bewilderment and confusion. Ma La thought he must face again those questions that had troubled countless people, and now repeatedly troubled him. But an even more severe question was, going forward, how should he live? Ma La truly hoped the spirits of his brother and Teacher Liu in heaven could enlighten him, but dimly he seemed to hear a stern voice. "You must answer this question yourself. None of us can help you." He couldn't distinguish whether this was his brother Ma Kei's voice or Teacher Liu's. If, in the already more than half-completed journey of his life, Ma La had always moved forward in the direction his brother Ma Kei and Teacher Liu had pointed out, then now he must independently make his own choice about the latter half of his life. It seemed only today that Ma La realized he'd truly matured. For someone already approaching the age of 40, wasn't this a bit too late? The wilderness stood empty. Only a wisp of smoke rose lazily from that solitary grave mound, lingering long in the sky, like Ma La's drifting, uncertain thoughts. As the sky darkened, Ma La shouldered his shovel and walked toward the river embankment. Before reaching the sentry shed, he saw from afar a person standing on the embankment with a mud-splattered Suzuki motorcycle parked beside him. This person was about Ma La's age, but far more powerfully built, with a very broad face like a thick mulberry wood chopping block, slightly bulging eyes. Ma La recognized him at a glance. This was his childhood companion and classmate, Big Bowl Uncle's son, Guo Dongsheng. Guo Dongsheng also saw Ma La, tossed away his cigarette butt, and strode quickly toward him. "A couple days ago, as soon as I heard you'd come back, I wanted to see you, but yesterday there was a meeting in town all day." Guo Dongsheng grasped Ma La's hand with those large hands trained in carpentry, shaking it vigorously twice, his gaze sizing up Ma La's face like a planing tool. "Went to pay respects at your mother's and brother's graves? Since you left Yanhe, we haven't seen each other at all, have we? Over a decade in a flash," Guo Dongsheng said in a reproachful tone. "You're still the same as before. Come back and don't even come find me." "You can't blame me for that. The first thing I did when I got back was ask about you. Ask Big Bowl Uncle if you don't believe me." Ma La earnestly protested. "I thought you still lived in Shenhuangzhou. Are you still thinking about us fighting over the bedding?" Guo Dongsheng looked at Ma La and made a joke. "When we were kids, I got plenty of slaps from my dad. He always protected you, as if I wasn't his own son and you were his real child instead. That's right, you were insanely jealous of me over that. Ma La recalled something, half joking. By the way, Dongsheng, why don't you have Big Bowl Uncle come live with you? His health isn't what it used to be. All alone, if he gets sick, there's no one to care for him. Hey, you know my dad's stubborn temperament. He's still like before. Nothing I do looks right to him. Forget living together. Even when I try to talk to him, he barely responds. Guo Dongsheng smiled bitterly, stammering, "Of course, you also know my wife's temperament." Ma La thought of Dongsheng's wife, who'd once been the brigade women's director, fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Is it just because of these things?" Sigh. Ultimately, it's all about collecting retention fees for the village. Just because of this, my dad not only cursed me in public, but even slapped me. Tell me, how can I continue being village party secretary? Big Bowl Uncle isn't someone unreasonable. I heard you locked a bunch of kids in the village elementary school as hostages, forcing parents to pay money to ransom them? You can't put it that way, can you? What do you mean hostages? A few village cadres, and I run our legs off every year and still can't collect it all. The town presses hard, so we have to adopt some coercive measures. As Guo Dongsheng spoke, his face flushed slightly. You don't know how hard it is being a village cadre now. This village party secretary position is really just a bill collector. All I do is thankless work. If we can't collect the various taxes, fees, and retention payments, we can't report to the town and county. But if we use some coercive measures on villagers, we offend the locals. They curse me as a bandit, a scraping party, all kinds of awful things. They stop just short of treating me like the puppet village chief in movies. It's really like Pigsy looking in a mirror, not human on either side. Seeing Guo Dongsheng's aggrieved expression, Ma La couldn't help needling him. Listening to you, the villagers deliberately oppose those above, and you've become the greatest victim? I'd never say such unconscionable things. Guo Dongsheng shook his head. To tell the truth, the most suffering people in all of China right now are still the farmers. Who wants to be chased by debt collectors all day like Yang Bailao, hiding here and there, not daring to come home even on New Year's Eve? Newspapers and TV reporting on rural areas always focus on those coastal regions and areas near big cities, as if farmers live better than city people. But you only need to look at these vast stretches of abandoned land in Shenhuangzhou, the village cold and deserted, to know what most rural areas are like. The two friends who'd been separated for many years talked as they walked along the embankment. After walking a stretch, they descended the embankment slope and walked along the riverbank into a wilderness. This used to be good cropland, but now it was overgrown with waist-high reeds and wild grass. Looking out, vast and boundless, it stretched all the way to the distant riverbank beach. Autumn sunlight poured down unobstructed, illuminating the wilderness as if it were on fire. After a sustained period of rainy weather followed by several consecutive clear days, the climate that had begun to cool had warmed considerably, becoming hot again like summer. This was what people commonly called autumn tiger. Moisture stored underground evaporated, making a layer of pale purple mist permeate the wilderness. Under the sun's rays, it turned resplendent with purple and crimson colors, giving one a sense of ethereal mystery. Facing such a vast, uninhabited wilderness, Ma La's mind conjured scenes from spring planting and autumn harvest. Those spirited work scenes of racing against each other, people jubilant and horses neighing. He couldn't help but murmur with some melancholy, "How did it come to this? How did it come to this?" Guo Dongsheng's broad face, dark with a reddish tinge, had already broken out in sweat. He wiped it with his hand, flinging away a string of droplets like raindrops, then unbuttoned his collar, rolled up his baggy trouser legs, squatted on the ground, pulled out a grass root and stuck it in his mouth to chew, while saying to Ma La, "You've been away so many years, you don't understand the rural situation. It's not like when we had collectives or when fields were first divided to households. Cotton and grain crops are worth less and less. Every year, higher-ups shout about reducing farmers' burdens, but public grain taxes and fees get higher year by year. Sometimes a farming household works all year and might even lose money. Tell me, Who'd still farm this land? He spat out the grass root as if questioning Ma La. For an instant, Ma La seemed to see again that youthful companion with the shaved head who loved mischief and playing tricks. When they were young, they'd often go together to the still uncultivated sandbar to cut cattle grass, chase wild rabbits, catch hedgehogs. Dongsheng always led the way, wearing a silver collar around his neck, gripping an unusually sharp steel fork, moving with surprising agility. Later, after Ma La read Lu Xun's My Old Home in a middle school textbook, he felt Dongsheng back then really resembled the young Runtu. Such good cropland, what a pity, Ma La still murmured. Where are the village people? Have they all left? All gone to the cities? Anyone with any connections has left. More than half of Shenhuangzhou's able-bodied workers have gone. Those who haven't left are mostly the old, weak, sick, and disabled. No matter how hard or tiring it is outside, at least you can earn some money, always better than staying home in poverty. Guo Dongsheng lit a cigarette. Even the former village party secretary, unable to collect taxes and retention fees, threw down his burden and went to work in Zhejiang. I was originally working as a carpenter in Wuhan, netting over 1,000 a month after expenses. But town leaders forcibly sent someone to call me back, saying personal interests must yield to national interests. Who told me I'm a party member? At this point, he smiled self-mockingly at Ma La. My dad blames me for implementing policy too harshly, but I blame him too. If he hadn't coaxed me into joining the party back then, would I now be stuck wearing this rotten yoke, suffering this kind of thankless squeeze from both sides? He suddenly slapped his forehead. Hey, look at me just talking about myself and forgetting what's important. This is your first time back to the village in over a decade, right? I thought you'd never come back. After all, you're not a native-born Shenhuangzhou person. Seeing Ma La about to explain something, he waved his hand dismissively as he used to when they argued. Shenhuangzhou still hasn't produced any notable figures. You're the first. I heard that back then, when our county leaders went to E-City on business and wanted to visit you and that all-powerful teacher Liu, they nearly got turned away. Was that true? I'd just entered the city looking for work, completely in the dark like a blind donkey running into walls everywhere. I really wanted to go to E-City and ask you for a meal, but after hearing about that, I lost heart. What are you talking about? Ma La found this somewhat absurd. I haven't told you yet, I just got out after serving several years in prison, have I? I heard about that long ago, Guo Dongsheng said. But so what? You got out, didn't you? The entrepreneurs in newspapers now. Which one hasn't been in and out several times? Someone like you who dealt in automobiles, buying and selling thousands of MU of land at a time, who did great things on a grand scale. As long as the Green Mountains remain, there's no fear of lacking firewood. Sooner or later, you'll make a comeback. Is that so? Ma La said vaguely. I haven't thought about it that way. Don't play dumb with me. Afraid I'll come asking for trouble? Guo Dongsheng gave him a look and said seriously, Don't worry. When the time comes, if you still remember you're from Shenhuangzhou, just invest some money to help us pave that mud pit road to Heku with asphalt. This isn't me personally asking for help. Seeing Guo Dongsheng's earnest expression, Ma La couldn't help but smile slightly. You as village party secretary don't seem as bad as I initially thought, still thinking about securing some benefits for the villagers, but... He paused slightly in thought. Dongsheng, what if I told you that this time I came back to Shenhuangzhou planning to stay and not leave? What would you think? Squatting on the ground, Guo Dongsheng stared straight at Ma La after hearing this. Suddenly, whether burned by the cigarette in his hand or shocked by Ma La's words, he jumped up abruptly, walked before Ma La, and with those large hands accustomed to wielding axes, traced a huge arc toward the desolate sandbar before them, saying in a teasing tone, Don't tell me you plan to stay in Shenhuangzhou to reclaim this abandoned grassland beach. You guessed right, Dongsheng. These past few days, I really have been thinking this, and the feeling's growing stronger, Ma La said in a serious tone. Then he turned to face that vast, boundless wilderness, spreading his hands outward and like reciting poetry, softly intoned, The fields and gardens will go to waste. Why not return? Guo Dongsheng didn't catch what he'd recited. He looked at Ma La like looking at a strange creature, his face full of astonishment. Chapter 7. When faced with a person of such exceptional character, no matter how far he has fallen, you cannot look down upon or despise him. Shortly after returning to Shenhuangzhou, Ma La made a trip to Yanhe County Town. Yanhe County Town sits on the southern bank of the Jingjiang, located at the junction of the Jianghan Plain and the Dongting Lake Plain. It borders Huarong County in Hunan and has long been an important passage connecting northern Hunan and southwestern Hubei, a strategic military location since ancient times. According to legend, during the Three Kingdoms period, Liu Bei held a ceremony here to marry Lady Sun. To this day, the county town still preserves many remnants related to this legend, such as the shadow-reflecting bridge, wife-awaiting rock, and Liu Lang Wharf. Although historians throughout the ages have questioned this legend, the people of Yanhe County believe it without doubt, and whenever they mention it to outsiders, they reveal a sense of pride. The local county gazetteer also spares no ink in recording and embellishing these stories. Back when Ma La was helping teacher Liu establish the Kunpeng Company, Yanhe County was vigorously developing its tourism resources and planned to erect a statue of Lady Sun beside the wife-awaiting rock by the river. The Tourism Bureau approached teacher Liu, hoping he would provide financial support. Although the company was in its startup phase and funds were tight, teacher Liu donated 3,000 yuan without hesitation. Yet Yanhe County never became a renowned historical city like Jingzhou Ancient City and other prefectural capitals from the Three Kingdoms era, remaining largely unknown until several years ago during a catastrophic flood. Because Yanhe County was located in a critical flood control danger zone, CCTV's weather and flood prevention programs reported on it daily, suddenly turning this obscure little county into the focus of national attention. Compared to 10-some years ago, the county town had obviously become much more prosperous. When Ma La took the ferry from the north bank to the south bank and walked into the county town, he almost didn't recognize it. The town originally had only one narrow street, squeezed between the Yangtze River and Bijia Mountain to the east. The buildings were monotonous and low, with the tallest being the 3-story cinema theater built in the 1970s, which for a long time was considered the town's landmark building. Ma La remembered that during his first semester at Teachers College, he watched a film for the first time in the newly completed cinema theater. The theater still emanated a pungent smell of fresh paint. The film had already started. He hunched over and tiptoed through the aisle, and when he settled into a spacious, comfortable seat, the screen displayed a gloomy, oppressive 19th-century English landscape. Vast, boundless pastures, desolate, lonely countryside, a young woman in a black long dress and wide-brimmed sun hat walking alone. That was his first time watching a foreign film, and he was quickly captivated by this strange and exotic atmosphere. Then the scene cut to a rugged mountain path shrouded in deep blue mist. With the sound of urgent hoofbeats, a man with a hooked nose, heron eyes, and wearing a cloak came galloping on a fast horse. At a bend, the solitary woman and the mounted man met on a narrow road. The burly man reined in his horse, which reared up on its hind legs, neighing skyward, nearly throwing him off. Thus, the two protagonists of the film became acquainted. The woman was named Jane Eyre, the man Rochester, and between them developed a moving love story. The film was Jane Eyre. After returning to school, for several days Ma La remained immersed in the film's melancholy and powerfully affecting atmosphere, with Rochester's deeply touching dialogue with Jane upon their reunion after he had gone blind echoing repeatedly in his ears. Later, Ma La borrowed the novel of the same name from teacher Liu, but strangely, the novel didn't give him anywhere near the powerful impact of the film. Nevertheless, Ma La's strong interest in 19th-century foreign literature began from there. Now, the cinema theater had long been squeezed into an obscure corner by newly risen buildings, looking as shabby and dim as an impoverished fallen son from a declining family. The shops on both sides of the street and the dazzling array of product advertisements were eye-catching, and the level of bustling prosperity was not much inferior to Hanzheng Street in Hankou. The layout of the county town had also expanded by 2 or 3 times compared to before, developing from a single street in the past to several new streets radiating out around Bijia Mountain. Bijia Mountain had transformed from the edge of the urban area to the center of the county town, with a tall television transmission tower atop the mountain peak, indicating that the cultural life of county residents had also entered the information age. The county government had relocated from its original location to an imposing 8-story building situated in the center of the new district. After considerable effort searching around, Ma La finally found the county government office building. Although the county government had no armed police with guns standing guard, the uniformed guards scrutinized every stranger entering the building more severely than police would. Ma La hadn't brought any identification. In fact, since entering prison to serve his sentence, he no longer had any documents that could prove his identity. According to China's household registration system, although he had lived and worked outside for many years, his household registration was still in Hekou, Yanhe County. The identity card issued by Hekou Police Station back then had long since been lost somewhere, and even if it hadn't been lost, it would have expired. However, he had always kept Teacher Liu's identity card, so when the guard asked Ma La for identification and questioned what he did for a living, his face showed confusion, even some guilty conscience. Yes, indeed. What do I do? For the first time, he discovered the ambiguous uncertainty of his current identity. Sorry, I didn't bring any identification, Ma La mumbled. He realized he was lying, and his face reddened slightly. But the guard didn't notice this. He probably could tell from Ma La's dress and bearing that he wasn't the type to make trouble for the government, so he didn't rudely turn him away, but asked whom he was looking for. Ma La said he was looking for Ding Yupeng. The guard looked at him with a strange expression and said, "You're looking for Deputy County Magistrate Ding. What's your relationship to him?" Ma La said he was his classmate. He scrutinized Ma La carefully once more, walked into the guard room and made a phone call. When he came back out after hanging up, his tone had become polite and courteous. "Please go to the 5th floor. Deputy County Magistrate Ding is waiting for you in his office." Ma La met his old classmate Ding Yupeng in a very spacious office. Ding Yupeng looked even more ambitious and self-satisfied than when he had visited Ma La at the labor reform farm. Even the intimacy he displayed while shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries seemed somewhat exaggerated, as if performing before an audience or television cameras. While he talked with Ma La, the 2 phones on his desk rang incessantly like a battlefield command post in a movie. "You see, the moment I walk into this office, I can't get a moment's peace." He made a helpless gesture. "What can I do? I'm taking in-service graduate courses in sociology at W University while also managing my assigned work. Every time I return to the county, things have piled up into a huge mess. Right now we're in the middle of enterprise reform. Everything's converged at once, and all day long there's endless wrangling. It's absolutely dizzying." He suddenly thought of something. "Oh, right, my master's thesis advisor is a woman, quite a well-known scholar. I heard her say that she was once sent down to our Yanhe County, and actually to your Shenhuangzhou. Isn't that a coincidence?" Ma La asked. "What's her name?" "Murong-Chu." Ma La softly said, "Oh," feeling something deep inside being touched, and couldn't help feeling somewhat dazed. Ding Yupeng noticed and asked, "Do you know her?" I know her," Ma La murmured with a strange expression. "She was my music teacher at Shenhuangzhou Elementary School." He also wanted to say that among the group of Wuhan youth sent down to Shenhuangzhou back then, Murong-Chu was the most beautiful, with a lovely voice. Speaking was like a lark singing, and she especially loved reading books. His brother Meike often borrowed books from her. Ma La would always secretly read through the books before his brother finished them. Just then, Ding Yupeng finished a phone call and shrugged at Ma La, looking somewhat helpless. "No good. It's too noisy here. Let's change location and chat." Ding Yupeng personally drove Ma La to the county government guest house. The guest house was Yanhe County's state guest house, situated halfway up Bijia Mountain, nestled among trees, exceptionally quiet. In the past, when working with Teacher Liu at the company, Ma La had entertained quite a few business clients here, but the guest house had obviously been renovated since then, with much improved conditions compared to before. The newly built VIP building especially, used for receiving superior leaders, was so luxurious it was no less grand than the star-rated hotels Ma La had stayed in previously in Ni City. After sitting down in an unusually spacious suite in the VIP building, Ding Yuping deliberately turned off his mobile phone. "Even if the sky falls, I won't worry about it," he said, placing his phone on the coffee table and leaning back comfortably into the sofa. "Today I'm keeping you company the whole way. In any case, we need to have a good chat." He squinted at Ma La. Only at this moment did he seem to have the leisure to carefully observe his old classmate. At this moment, Ma La, sitting on the opposite sofa, was also observing this former classmate. Ding Yuping's crew-cut, casual jacket, meticulously tied necktie, and gleaming leather shoes all made Ma La involuntarily think of those county magistrates and party secretaries he'd seen in novels and on television. He even recalled the scene in How the Steel Was Tempered when Pavel, after recovering from serious illness, found his old comrade Dmitri from their railway construction days in Kiev. Of course, Ding Yuping had none of Dmitri's bureaucratic airs, nor did he put on any pretensions befitting a county magistrate. His warmth was impeccable, yet Ma La still felt uneasy. He knew this was the effect of the scissors gap of time at work. He truly couldn't adapt to the long void left by those full 7 years spent in the almost completely isolated labor reform farm. Ma La's gaze briefly met Ding Yuping's before quickly looking away, landing on the mobile phone Ding Yuping had placed on the coffee table. It was a newly released ultra-thin Motorola phone, as compact as a thin bar of soap. This was the first time Ma La had seen such a small phone. Teacher Liu's brick phone was big and heavy like an actual brick when held in hand. When did phones become this small? Ma La wondered in amazement. Ding Yuping noticed Ma La's mind had wandered, and from the moment he first saw Ma La, he had detected that lost expression on his face, along with the familiar sensitivity and self-respect hiding behind it. But Ding Yuping continued making small talk as if he hadn't noticed. He had a server bring freshly brewed tea, this year's newly released premium Longjing. He personally poured it for Ma La. He noticed that Ma La's sitting posture on the sofa was still somewhat stiff, his back ramrod straight, as if he were still sitting on those hard wooden benches without backrests at the labor reform farm listening to lectures from supervisors. All of this produced an indescribable feeling in Ding Yuping's heart. The room was unusually quiet. This was a large suite of over 30 square meters, with thick jute carpeting on the floor, a product of Yanhe County Carpet Factory. The green floor-length curtains opposite undulated like waves in the breeze, and one could occasionally see the swaying branches and leaves of several oleanders on the hillside outside. Ding Yuping had reported to provincial and regional leaders many times in this room, or accompanied leaders playing mahjong or cards, but now facing Ma La, he seemed somewhat at a loss. Ma La was still as taciturn and inarticulate as before. People who didn't know him might think he was slow or clumsy, but in reality, how acute this man's thoughts were, how rich his inner world. In this regard, he was too much like their teacher Liu. Back in teachers' college, it was precisely because of this that Ding Yuping had always secretly envied Ma La, while also admiring him immensely, thus forming between them an ambiguous friendship. When facing a person of such exceptional character, no matter how far he has fallen, you cannot look down upon or despise him. Ding Yuping quietly let out a sigh. At that moment, he obviously thought of the long-deceased teacher Liu, but he was unwilling to bring up such sad matters at present. He raised his eyelids and looked at Ma La, saying, "Old classmate, you've finally come out. I've been looking forward to this day. Tell me, what are your plans? Are you preparing to go back to Nye City and make a comeback, or would you prefer to stay here in Yanhe County? I know you're someone who won't be easily defeated. With your abilities, which far exceed mine, sometimes I think If you hadn't gone to Nye City with Teacher Liu back then, and we had worked together to build something here in Yanhe County, how wonderful that would have been." "You're giving me too much credit," Ma La said, a hint of self-mockery and irony appearing at the corner of his mouth. "I'm an ex-convict released from labor reform. How dare I compare myself to you, a dignified county magistrate?" "Your words are still as caustic, same old temperament," Ding Yupeng said. "More than 10 years, and you haven't changed a bit. You probably won't believe it when I say this, but although I'm a deputy county magistrate now, these years I've played grandson and father, dressed up as the king of hell, and then as a little ghost. Even I don't know who I am anymore. Sometimes I'm exhausted to the point of panic and really want to throw off this official hat, be free as an individual, do what I want to do. But in the end, I find I can't even find a friend to speak honestly with. I'm not as well off as a common citizen. If I'd known it would be like this, I really shouldn't have changed careers back then." Ding Yupeng's words perhaps had some sincerity, but were obviously somewhat affected. This seemed to be a peculiar habit of all leaders. The corner of Ma La's mouth showed his characteristic smile again. Mouth slightly askew to the right, corners turned up, eyes looking sideways, a kind of mockery without malice. Back in teachers' college, whenever Ma La and Ding Yupeng argued over some issue, he would suddenly fall silent, this faint smile appearing on his face, causing Ding Yupeng to hang his head in deflation just as he felt victory was at hand. In truth, without Ding Yupeng's own account, Ma La could imagine from his understanding of him how he had climbed from a minor education bureau clerk to the deputy county magistrate's seat. Besides his father Ding Cheng Shui's background as a southbound cadre, it was undoubtedly also due to the social and organizational abilities he had displayed even in teachers' college. But what kind of parent official was Ding Yupeng in the hearts of Yanhe County people? One could be certain he wasn't like Li Xiangnan in New Star. The shrewd and worldly Ding Yupeng lacked that kind of idealistic passion, though back then he had so enthusiastically recommended the novel New Star to Ma La and practically made Li Xiangnan his idol. But in his bones, Ding Yupeng was the type who loved showing off and had a strong sense of vanity. In teachers' college, he couldn't even qualify as a proper member of the literary society. Ma La recalled the times he'd ghost-written love letters for him and couldn't help wondering, could such a deputy county magistrate accomplish anything noteworthy in Yanhe County? Ding Yupeng noticed the expression on Ma La's face and stopped talking in time. He raised his wrist to check his watch. "Oh, it's almost noon. Let's go eat first and chat while we eat." With that, he stood up from the sofa. They entered a rather elegantly appointed private dining room in the VIP building restaurant. Ding Yupeng had obviously given the restaurant advance notice, wanting to treat Ma La well. As soon as they sat down, servers brought out food and wine. "Today I'm treating you privately, not on public funds," Ding Yupeng gestured to Ma La, half-jokingly saying, "You don't need to worry about me engaging in corruption." From entering the labor reform farm to serve his sentence until now, this was almost the first time in over 10 years that Ma La had seen such a sumptuous banquet. His stomach, tortured by the labor reform farm's pig slop-like unpalatable meals and worn unbearably rough, was now eagerly stirring with anticipation. Faced with his old classmates' generous hospitality, Ma La couldn't bother with courtesy. Therefore, throughout the entire dining process that followed, using terms like wolfish devouring and glutton to describe Ma La would not be the least bit excessive. "Eat up! Eat more! This is wild turtle, much more nutritious than the farmed kind." Ding Yupeng ladled a large spoonful of braised turtle meat into Ma La's bowl. He himself hardly touched his chopsticks. He smoked while watching Ma La eat, his expression like someone appreciating a work of art. He was obviously satisfied with the role he was playing at this moment. The once famous Ma La, after enduring years of imprisonment, had sought out him, an old classmate whose career could be said to be at its zenith. Wasn't such a scene exactly what Ding Yupeng had been dreaming of? But while his vanity was being satisfied, he also felt a kind of sympathetic compassion for Ma La. Without asking, he knew Ma La's current situation. He believed that Ma La, who had once had glorious days, wouldn't remain defeated after finally emerging from misfortune. Ma La's coming to see him must surely be hoping to receive his help, and he was, of course, willing to give this fallen hero a hand at such a critical moment. As an old classmate, it was his duty. Therefore, from the moment they met, Ding Yuping had been secretly anticipating Ma La actively asking him for help. He thought that no matter what Ma La requested, as long as it was within his power, he would certainly agree without hesitation. He waited patiently, but at this moment, watching Ma La continuously eating with his head down, he was becoming a bit impatient. He felt Ma La didn't seem to have any intention of asking him for help at all. From meeting until now, he had even remained taciturn, rarely speaking, his absent-minded expression impossible to fathom. This instead left Ding Yuping perplexed. Had the 7 years of hard labor broken Ma La's courage to start over? Or was it still his old stubborn temperament at work? Ding Yuping recalled how in teacher's college, Ma La's meal tickets always ran out by the end of each month, and to economize, he often ate only 2 meals a day. Yet even when hungry, he never extended his hand to anyone, and when Ding Yuping took the initiative to give him his extra meal tickets, he refused to accept them. Could it be that after so many years, Ma La in middle age still had that same old temperament? "You didn't come find me just to eat a meal and not say a word to me," Ding Yuping challenged him. "Tell me, what are your plans? If you still want to work in your old trade and run a business, need a loan, I can—" But before Ding Yuping could finish, Ma La interrupted him. "If I wanted to work in my old trade, I wouldn't need to come back to Yanhe." He wiped his oil-stained mouth with a napkin, glanced at Ding Yuping, and said, "I don't want to do anything anymore. I just want to retire to my hometown and live a leisurely life." He spoke very seriously, not at all like he was joking. "Retire to your hometown? But you're still a year younger than me," Ding Yuping said sarcastically. "This doesn't sound like something the executive president who followed Teacher Liu building an empire and made Kunpeng Company famous nationwide would say." "I've forgotten all that old history, but you still remember it," Ma La said with a half-smile. "Now I'm just an ordinary citizen of Yanhe County. It's rare that you, county magistrate, have condescended to host me. I'm already quite content." "Old classmate, stop playing games with me," Ding Yuping said. "What do you need? Don't tell me you came back to Yanhe County to farm a few acres of land and become a farmer." "You guessed right, that's exactly what I'm thinking," Ma La said slowly. "The countryside is full of wasteland now, Shen Huangzhou alone. Anyway, it's sitting there abandoned. Such a waste." Ding Yuping looked at Ma La in astonishment, as if he had just met him for the first time. This wasn't the ambitious Ma La of before. He thought, could 7 or 8 years really completely defeat a person? Ding Yuping seemed to search Ma La's gaunt, unshaven, somewhat down-and-out face for some clue. Ding Yuping looked at Ma La with suspicion all over his face. "You, this entrepreneur, always like to ambush me, just like when you suddenly told me you were resigning to go into business." The two men drank and chatted, both getting somewhat drunk. Suddenly, Ding Yuping stood up and said, "Come on, I'm taking you to meet someone." Who are we meeting?" "My old man." "The old man—" Ma La looked at Ding Yuping, momentarily stunned, before remembering that Ding Yuping's father, Ding Changshui, had once been party secretary of Heku Commune. The two men came out of the hotel. Ding Yuping checked the watch on his wrist and waved his hand. "It's not far, less than an hour's walk. Let's walk." Ma La thought, an hour's walk isn't exactly close, is it? For him, this distance was nothing, but thinking that Deputy County Magistrate Ding Yuping had a car at his disposal, yet wanted to accompany him walking this far, he felt somewhat apologetic. The two had just reached the hotel entrance when a black Santana pulled up beside them with a screech. A bald head poked out of the car window, saying to Ding Yuping, "County Magistrate Ding, where are you going? Let me give you a ride." Ding Yuping waved his hand. "No need, I'm taking my old classmate for a stroll around the streets." Saying this, He tugged Ma La's arm, and the two walked out of the hotel entrance looking quite chummy. On the busy street, people came and went, and from time to time someone would greet Ding Yupeng with an expression full of surprise, walking past and then turning back to stare. Ma La muttered, "Those people are looking at you so strangely." "They're just surprised. I usually go everywhere by car. When do I have time to stroll the streets?" Ding Yupeng laughed heartily, stretching his arms and legs as if he'd gained some kind of release, looking relaxed and carefree. After walking a bit, Ding Yupeng leaned close to Ma La's ear and asked in a low voice, as if revealing some secret, "Do you know why I'm walking to see the old man?" Ma La was somewhat puzzled. "Exercise? You and I aren't at the age where we need exercise to maintain health, are we?" Ding Yupeng glanced at Ma La, a trace of self-mockery appearing on his face. "Don't think that just because I act important in public and my word is law, in front of the old man I'm just an obedient child. Where he points east, I dare not go west. Every time I visit him, I absolutely cannot take a government car. This is the old man's rule, even when accompanying guests. No exceptions. Once I had the driver drive me to a spot near where the old man lives and stop. Then I walked over. But the old man saw through me immediately. 'You little rascal, trying to fool me. Walking for an hour, could your trouser cuffs and shoes have no dust on them?' The old man was a little 8th Route Army soldier. Even in his 70s, he still has such sharp eyes. Though his hearing's a bit off, he always mishears things." Hearing Ding Yupeng repeatedly say, "The old man," Ma La's mind conjured up an image of a middle-aged man with prominent cheekbones, a dark, weathered face, and burly build, wearing an old military uniform, a straw hat on his head, military canteen slung over his shoulder, trouser legs rolled up to his knees, holding a bamboo pole, striding energetically along a rural canal path under the blazing sun. That was Heku Commune Party Secretary Ding Changshui in young Ma La's eyes. After 30 years, this image had become as blurred as an old negative. Once again, doubt arose in his heart. Why did Ding Yupeng want to take him to see this retired old man? Ding Yupeng seemed to read his thoughts and said, "After retirement, the old man has never been idle. Not only does he watch the news broadcast on time every day, he also subscribes to People's Daily at his own expense, more concerned about national affairs than me, a deputy county magistrate." Ma La asked, "You don't live with your father?" "We used to live together," Ding Yupeng said. "The old man retired from the position of County People's Congress Director. He was allocated a 200-plus square meter apartment in the old county committee residential compound. Our whole family living there felt spacious and empty. Since my mother passed away a few years ago, the old man, for some reason, refused to live in the spacious house. Instead, he used his own savings to buy an old farmhouse on the edge of the county town and lives there alone. Every day he plants crops and vegetables, raises chickens and ducks, busy as can be. His days are fulfilling. The only thing he's not satisfied with is having no one to talk to, so I go over to keep him company every week. Once the old man's talk box opens, there's no end to it. Can't get away for an hour or two." "So you're saying you want me to go chat with your father?" Ma La couldn't help interrupting him. Ding Yupeng paused before answering. "Strictly speaking, the old man wants to see you." "Your old man knows me?" Ma La didn't believe Ding Yupeng's words. 30 years ago, he was still in elementary school. How would a commune party secretary know him? "The old man doesn't know you, but he knows your brother Ma Ke," Ding Yupeng said. "Once when I was talking with him about you and Teacher Liu, mentioning your brother's relationship, unexpectedly the old man grabbed me and asked endless questions, telling me story after story about your brother." Hearing his brother's name, Ma La's heart skipped a beat. "Since then, the old man reminds me every so often, 'When are you bringing your classmate, Ma Ke's brother, to see me?' I got annoyed being pestered and snapped at him. 'He's still serving his sentence at the farm. If you really want to see him, figure out how to get him out early.' The old man's eyebrows knitted when he heard this, and he said sternly, 'That won't do. Rule of law. We can't abandon principles.' Ha ha ha, the old man is just that stubborn." When Ding Yupeng talked about the old man, he was cheerful, really like a big kid. For some reason, Ma La no longer minded being dragged along by Ding Yupeng to chat with his father, and instead felt somewhat eager to meet this old man. Not far down from the county's main road, through a chaotic residential area of varying heights, they reached the suburban zone. The houses here were crowded and disorderly, without any plan, some quite luxuriously renovated buildings with cars or trucks parked at their entrances. Occasionally, one could also see several dilapidated old houses, their entrances overgrown with weeds, piled with garbage, their crumbling walls still bearing slogans from decades past. Farmland and vegetable gardens were scattered like patches here and there, with crops and vegetables growing quite luxuriantly, rarely any abandoned land visible. This was, after all, a suburban area where the gold content of land was naturally higher. "Every time I come, I work up a sweat. The old man really makes me suffer." Ding Yupeng pulled out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from his forehead, pointing ahead. "There, that red brick bungalow." The red brick bungalow had 3 rooms. It was clearly an old house, but aside from the wooden windows being somewhat broken, the 4 walls and roof looked fairly solid. The main door stood open. The main hall was kept quite clean, with the aged cement floor peeling in several places, exposing reddish-brown earth. The walls on both sides were bare, covered with cracks and smoke stains. In the center of the main wall hung a fairly new portrait of Chairman Mao, with a couplet on each side. "Spring winds and willow branches by the thousands, 600 million in the land of Shun and Yao." In front of the door stood a large chinaberry tree, its trunk higher than the roof ridge, branches like a giant palm reaching toward the sky. Under the tree sat an old-fashioned wooden chair with armrests, blackened with age. In front of the chair was an equally old-looking long wooden table with a stack of newspapers topped with reading glasses, and beside it an enamel cup, its rim covered with brown tea stains. "The old man must be busy in the yard," Ding Yupeng said as he walked toward the house. Ma La hesitated a moment, then followed Ding Yupeng through the main hall, through the half-closed back door into the backyard, and his eyes couldn't help but light up. Before him was a vegetable garden enclosed by a hibiscus hedge. Calling it a vegetable garden wasn't quite accurate, because besides the already withered peppers, beans, cucumbers, and other vegetables, the garden also grew sorghum, corn, sesame, and soybeans. Though the garden wasn't large, only about 2 or 3 fen in area, these vegetables and crops were well ordered and distributed very rationally, showing that the garden's owner was an expert at farming. "See, this is the old man's masterpiece," Ding Yupeng whispered to Ma La. Before he'd finished speaking, a voice came from somewhere. "It's not visitation time yet. Why'd you come today?" "The old man calls our weekly father-son meetings visitations," Ding Yupeng said, winking at Ma La. Ma La found this father and son quite amusing. He looked around but didn't see the speaker. Just as he was puzzled, the voice sounded again with a heavy Shanxi accent. "What are you standing there for? Come help!" "Every time I come, the old man puts me to work." Ding Yupeng made a wronged face at Ma La, thrust his briefcase into his hands, and walked into the garden. Ma La followed a few steps, only then seeing clearly the source of the voice. Behind the hibiscus hedge squatted an old man, about 70-some years old, full head of gray hair, face deeply and densely wrinkled like a firm walnut. He wore a faded old military uniform, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, on his head an 8th Route Army cap that could only be seen in museums, equally old and faded beyond its original color. At this moment, he held several thin nylon ropes in his mouth, one knee on the ground, the other knee braced against the hibiscus hedge, working hard to pull together gaps that were too large and secure them with rope. This job really required 2 people, so naturally the old man alone found it quite strenuous. Beads of sweat trickled down from the wrinkles on his face, dripping to the ground. He freed a hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead while saying without looking up, "If I don't tighten this hedge, those bastard weasels will eat up all the crops." Ma La squatted down opposite the old man, taking the nylon rope he passed over. Father and son pulled a section of the hedge gap together. Only then did Ding Yupeng stop, pointing at Ma La. "Dad, look who I brought you today." Only then did the old man notice someone else standing there. His gaze rested on Ma La for quite a while, then turned to his son, muttering, "Who's this?" "Didn't you want to meet my classmate? Today I brought him to see you." "You mean Ma Kei's brother?" The old man's gaze turned back to Ma La, staring fixedly at him, repeating, "You're really Ma Kei's brother?" Ma La nodded. The old man suddenly stood up, throwing the bamboo strips and rope to the ground, dusting off his soil-covered hands. "Come on, let's go drink tea at the entrance." Seeing Ding Yupeng still squatting by the hedge, Ma La hesitated. Ding Yupeng gave him a look. "My dad's treating you as an honored guest. Aren't you going?" Only then did Ma La wake as from a dream and turn to follow the old man inside. The old man bustled about, brewing tea and fetching stools, really like entertaining an honored guest. Ma La felt somewhat uncomfortable, as if the honored guest the old man was entertaining wasn't himself but someone else, and he was merely a substitute. This strange feeling made him even more anxious, especially when the somewhat gaunt old man before him seemed so unfamiliar, completely unlike the burly Commune Party secretary Ding Changshui of his childhood memories, striding along with wind at his heels. The old man brewed Ma La a steaming cup of fragrant tea and placed it on the long wooden table. 30-year-old pu'er tea, a gift from an old comrade in arms a few years ago. I've been reluctant to drink it. He sat down in the old-fashioned wooden chair himself, continuously looking at Ma La. "My pronounced eyesight is getting worse and worse. Can't even see things right under my nose clearly," he muttered, picking up the reading glasses from the newspapers and putting them on, opening his eyes wide to continue examining Ma La. The brothers really do look alike. Not just facial structure, even their builds are similar, just not as sturdy as your brother and eyebrows not as thick," the old man kept murmuring as if looking at a painting. "Back then, the Commune Party committee had already selected your brother as part of the third echelon. Know what the third echelon means? Successors. I was planning to promote him to Commune Youth League secretary the following year, but who knew, not long after, that fire broke out." The old man spoke in a reminiscing tone. "I remember a female sent down youth at Shenhuangzhou. What was her name? Right, Murong Chu, that's it. She was the Youth League committee member of Shenhuangzhou Brigade, an outstanding young person who emerged from the sent-down youth. Back then, your brother was in love with her. Quite a novel thing. If it had succeeded, I was planning to be their marriage witness. But who knew? Such a fine young man, sacrificed just like that." By the time the old man reached this point, tears glimmered faintly in his wrinkled eye sockets. Ma La's heart warmed. His brother had been dead nearly 30 years, yet this old man spoke of him with such emotion. During these years of wandering outside, Ma La had rarely even thought of his brother. But now, a sense of pride, even honor, suddenly arose in his heart. He hadn't felt this way in many years. "Oh, let's not talk about it. Decades ago, all just old, random stuff." The old man wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, smiled somewhat embarrassedly, and picked up the enamel cup to take a sip of tea. Ma La had just taken a sip. It was strong to the point of bitterness, but the old man was obviously accustomed to drinking strong tea. Moreover, his way of drinking tea was unusual. He swallowed the tea leaves along with the liquid, chewing them, only spitting them out after thoroughly chewing them to pulp. Seeing Ma La observing him, the old man suddenly asked, "I haven't asked your name yet." "I'm called Ma La." "Ma La." The old man repeated these two characters, examining him once more. "I've heard Yupeng mention your situation. The prodigal son who returns is worth more than gold. In a person's life, taking some detours and falling down doesn't matter. The key is to walk the right path and follow the right people. Just like when I was young, if I hadn't joined the 8th Route Army and had instead followed the Kuomintang or even the Puppet Army, wouldn't that have been a big fall?" The old man spoke in an elder's tone, patiently instructing. Ultimately, your mistake was in following your teacher down the wrong path. Ma La knew the old man was talking about Teacher Liu. He wanted to explain something, mumbling, But as soon as he opened his mouth, the old man waved his hand, interrupting him. That teacher of yours was just evil goods. Not only was his lifestyle corrupt, but his ideological concepts also had serious problems. At the time, some people in the Education Bureau and County Committee advocated lenient treatment, not realizing that if we showed such people one more bit of leniency, the party's cause would face one more danger. That's why I insisted on strict treatment. Looking back now, my attitude wasn't wrong. He later not only walked down the capitalist path himself, but also ruined the futures of young people like you. Just thinking about it is heartbreaking. Ma La wanted to defend Teacher Liu a bit. Perhaps Teacher Liu wasn't as bad as you say. Moreover, he didn't want to regret following the wrong person, including all those years following Teacher Liu battling in the business world. That couldn't be summed up with the word prodigal. After all, capital, this fierce horse, always needs someone to tame it. Teacher Liu's words back then weren't wrong. However, before Ma La could speak, the old man unceremoniously interrupted him again, like an orator, his diction sharp and aggressive, full of eloquence. Even when Ma La wanted to raise questions, he couldn't easily find any opening. This seemed to help him recall the image of that Commune Party secretary from years past. Ma La remembered Ding Yupeng's reminder on the way here. Indeed, reputation well-deserved. Once the talk box opened, it couldn't be shut, he thought. Fortunately, the old man suddenly changed the subject at this point. Ma Ke, what's your view on the current situation in rural areas? Hearing the old man call him Ma Ke, Ma La knew it was a slip of the tongue and didn't correct him, but regarding the old man's question, he found it difficult to answer for a moment. This question, I stayed at the labor reform farm for 7 or 8 years and just got out. He cleverly turned the question around. What's your view? The old man obviously hadn't expected Ma La to turn the tables on him, but having been a Commune Party secretary and county leader for many years, he had more than enough skill to handle this. I'm about the same as you. After retirement, I no longer concern myself with political affairs. Besides, even if I wanted to, no one would listen. Having a deputy county magistrate's son doesn't help. Yupeng never tells me about government affairs, avoids me like the plague, but he's not wrong. That's organizational principle. The old man said somewhat self-mockingly. Chairman Mao said, no investigation, no right to speak. Fortunately, these past few years I moved here. Besides growing crops, I've at least had some opportunities to interact with common people. I have at least some small right to speak, but this is still far from enough. 2 years ago, I went back to my hometown in Shanxi. Well, that was a real investigation. The old man's expression became grave as he reached this point. I'm from Swede in northern Shanxi. Ever heard of Swede? Speaking of home, my home is famous. I live in Sanlishipu village in Swede. That's what they sing about in Xintianyu. The Xintianyu also sings Mizzy's wives and Swede's men. That's the honest truth. Us Swede men are all top-notch, never produced a coward. Since Liu Jiming and Xie Zhiqiang stirred up red back then, just from our village over 100 joined the Red Army. I was still small then, 11 years old. Otherwise, I definitely would have followed the Red Army too. Later came the anti-Japanese war, right? The Red Army took off the 5-pointed stars from their caps, put on 8th Route Army uniforms, and when they were setting out for the front lines, they happened to pass through our village and rested for 2 days. The 8th Route Army's battalion headquarters stayed at my house. I seized the opportunity. The battalion commander's surname was Gu, given name Feng. I heard he'd been Chairman Mao's bodyguard. He had a square face, was very principled in everything he said and did. He paid for every bit of chili and garlic he used from my family. After much persistent pestering, Battalion Commander Gu finally agreed to let me join the army. That time, over a dozen people from our village joined the 8th Route Army together. I was the youngest at just 15. not even as tall as a rifle. Am I going too far afield? Let me tell you about my trip home. After joining the 8th Route Army, I only went home once. When the Liberation War started, I followed the Liu Jiming Army south, advanced 1,000 li into the Dabi Mountains, and after being wounded in the arm, I stayed to work in Yanhe. Right? It wasn't until 1955, when my mother was seriously ill and the family sent a telegram for me to come back, that I had a chance to visit home. I was the youngest in my family. Father died not long after I joined the army. All these years, Mother lived with my 2 older brothers and sister. The second day after I got home, Mother passed away. My brother told me that the only reason Mother refused to take her last breath was because she was waiting to see me once. For this one look, Mother waited decades. Of the over 200 from our village who went out to join the Red Army and 8th Route Army, only 20 or 30 survived. That I could go home to see Mother once made me quite fortunate. That time, after Mother's funeral, I stayed home 2 more days. Wasn't there a national cooperativization movement going on? Our village was no exception. From mutual aid teams to elementary cooperatives to advanced cooperatives, rolling forward wave after wave like Yellow River water. Of course, some people weren't willing. Take my brother, for example. During land reform, he was allocated over 10 MU of slopeland, and in just a few years, not only was the whole family fed and clothed, he'd saved considerable surplus grain, money in hand became abundant, life was rising like sesame flowers blooming steadily upward. Then suddenly, he had to hand back the land he'd received. Could he be happy about it? But later, after patient persuasion from the county and township work team comrades, he understood that establishing cooperatives didn't mean confiscating family land, but pooling it together, concentrating the strength of each household. Only this way could we avoid new landlords and rich peasants emerging in the countryside, avoid the poor eating bitterness twice and suffering twice, and walk the socialist broad road to common prosperity. My brother was a straightforward person. Once his mind opened up, his actions became swift. He not only quickly became an activist in the cooperative, but even became vice director. When I went home that time, he was leading cooperative members planting fruit tree saplings on a barren salt-alkali plot on the dry plateau beside the village. This way, they could both expand sideline production and resist wind and sand. All the villagers approved. Even I was infected by the villagers' fiery enthusiasm. Before leaving home, I followed my brother and family to the plateau and planted trees for half a day. I was telling you about going home 2 years ago. How did I get to 55? My brain is getting more and more disobedient. Let me talk about 2 years ago. I originally wanted Yu Peng to accompany me back to northern Shanxi, but he'd just become deputy county magistrate and was too busy with work, so I had Yu Peng's second sister accompany me back. It had been over 40 years since my last visit home, over 20 years since reform and opening up. I originally thought the folks back home would all be living prosperous lives, but as soon as I entered the village, I saw it still looked shabby. Some families still lived in cave dwellings built decades ago. Old people sunning themselves at the cave entrances were still in ragged clothes. The village road was full of potholes. A donkey cart carrying water was stuck in a pit and couldn't get out. The old man pulling the cart gathered all his strength, but the wheels didn't budge at all. Looking at this scene, no one came over to help, because there was hardly a single adult man visible in the village. They'd all gone to the city to pan for gold. Those left in the village were either women and children or elderly people who could barely walk. By farming, the villagers couldn't live decent lives. Unwilling to stay poor, they had no choice but to go out to make a living. Those with ability and good luck, after working outside for a few years, could come back and build a new brick cave dwelling, even build an impressive building. Most people didn't have such fortune. Working hard all year long, enduring humiliation and hardship, besides filling their own stomachs, when they returned home, they couldn't even bring back decent New Year goods. My brother had aged until his teeth had almost all fallen out. Only he and my sister-in-law were left at home, still guarding that cave dwelling from over 40 years ago that I'd stayed in during my last visit. Their 2 sons, grandsons, and granddaughters were all working in the city, only returning for New Year. The old couple still went to the fields with canes every day to earn their own grain. Depending on the little money their sons sent back each year, they could only buy oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar. That time I only stayed 1 night at home before leaving. After returning to Yanhe for a long time, my heart felt blocked. When I was a county leader, from coastal areas to inland, from south to north, from east to west, I traveled to many places. In those economically developed regions dripping with wealth, many farmers' income from selling land reached tens of millions of yuan. The whole family didn't need to do any work, spending all day playing cards and drinking tea, couldn't spend it all in a lifetime. But in remote mountain areas like my hometown, life was still the same as decades ago, even worse. This kind of gap between rich and poor isn't an isolated case, but a very common phenomenon. Our Yanhe is about the same. This is such a serious problem. From the day I joined the revolution, I knew the Communist Party's purpose was to fight for the poor. So many revolutionary martyrs shed their blood and sacrificed themselves for the sake of building a new society without exploitation, without oppression, where everyone is equal. But now, over 50 years after liberation, over 20 years after reform and opening up, we're not only no closer to our goal of struggle, but even farther than before. What's going on? Thinking about this, I can't sleep, can't eat properly. I'm not reconciled, so I can only reopen selected works of Mao Zedong and selected works of Deng Xiaoping, wanting to find answers. The center says Chairman Mao made mistakes, and now not many people believe what he said. But Comrade Xiaoping's words can't be disbelieved, right? He said that if our country experiences serious polarization and a new bourgeoisie emerges, our reform and opening up will have failed. No matter what, I don't want Comrade Xiaoping's words to become reality. If that happens, we'll have truly betrayed our original ideals and won't have any face to meet those martyrs after death. Having said so much in one breath, the old man finally vented the depression piled up in his heart. But he didn't feel much lighter. He pulled off the old army cap from his head and held it in his hands, kneading it forcefully. The wrinkles on his face contracted together, looking very pained. Regarding the old man's words just now, Ma La felt quite unfamiliar. 7 or 8 years of labor reform life had already created a deep estrangement between him and this era. But he was certain that the old man was speaking from his heart. At that moment, he felt the old man seemed so lonely, even pitiable, stirring a trace of pity in his heart. He wanted to comfort the old man, but couldn't say anything. The old man probably saw Ma La's thoughts and smiled bitterly. You don't need to say anything. That you can quietly listen to my innermost thoughts is enough for me. These years, finding someone to speak honestly with has been too difficult. Back in the day when I was party secretary at Heku Commune, at least a third of each year I was in the countryside, eating, living, and laboring together with farmers. After staying together long enough, feelings deepened. With deep feelings, how could work not be done well? The key is whether work is truly for the people's welfare or for personal advancement and wealth. This is a matter of principle, but Yu Ping doesn't want to hear me nag. He thinks my brain is outdated, can't keep up with the times. Today's cadres are all like this, keeping their eyes on superiors and outsiders all day long, either asking leaders for appropriations or seeking bosses for investment attraction, rarely going to grassroots level even once a year. Not only unwilling to go to grassroots, but they take cars everywhere regardless of distance, getting fat at a young age. Take Yu Peng. Every time he comes from town to see me, just that little distance, he's unwilling to walk. Taking advantage of the old man's complaints, Ma La got up and picked up the thermos to refill both their cups with boiling water. The old man looked up at Ma La and said, "Oh," then asked, "I haven't asked you yet. What are you planning to do next?" Ma La hesitated before saying, "I haven't completely decided yet, but one thing is certain, I want to stay in Shenhuangzhou." "Good. Staying is good." The old man quickly took up the conversation, nodding repeatedly in approval. After retirement, I rarely went to the countryside. 2 years ago, the County People's Congress organized old cadres for rural inspection. I followed along to several villages. What I saw was similar to what I saw at home in Sweden, all elderly and children, hardly any young people. When I was party secretary at Heku Commune, the countryside was the world of young people. Girls and young men sang while working. What was it called? Right, socialist labor competition. In the fields, songs rang out loud and clear, people were joyful and horses neighing. Just thinking of that scene makes one's blood boil. Reaching this point, the old man raised his arm and beat time, softly humming. Socialism is good. Socialism is good. In socialist countries, the people's status is high. Ding Yupeng, taking advantage of the old man and Ma La chatting, had sneaked inside the house for a nap. Now, yawning, he walked out. "Dad, talked enough yet? If you delay him catching the ferry, you'll have to manage dinner too." Saying this, he gave Ma La a look. Ma La understood his meaning and set down his teacup, standing up. The old man saw Ma La all the way to the roadside, looking reluctant to part, continuously waving as they separated. "We're kindred spirits. Come often." The two men bid farewell to the old man and walked along the road for just a few steps when a black sedan came from the county direction and silently stopped beside them. Ding Yupeng said nothing and opened the car door to climb in. Ma La hadn't yet reacted and stood dumbly by the roadside when Ding Yupeng waved at him from inside the car, calling out, "What are you spacing out for? Get in." When had Ding Yupeng called for the car? Ma La thought, this son really had a knack for handling his old man. Thinking this, Ma La bent down and climbed into the car. After the sedan started moving, Ding Yupeng grabbed Ma La's hand and shook it exaggeratedly a couple times. "Thanks for keeping my old man company and talking for so long today. You really worked hard." "It's nothing, it was fine." Ma La smiled faintly. "Fine?" Ding Yupeng looked at Ma La's face somewhat disbelievingly. "If I had to listen to him rehashing all that old stuff over and over, I'd have gone crazy." "Why would you think that?" Ma La looked at Ding Yupeng with some surprise. "Actually, I found this afternoon quite rewarding." "Rewarding? From the old man's outdated views?" Ding Yupeng couldn't help but nearly laugh out loud. "Maybe it's because you just got out of the farm and haven't had time to update what's in your brain yet." "Sometimes not everything new is necessarily better, including knowledge and concepts," Ma La said thoughtfully, gazing out the car window. "What are you saying?" Ding Yupeng was astonished by Ma La's words. "We're in the internet age, without new knowledge and new concepts. What kind of reform are we doing?" "But reviewing the old to learn the new hasn't become outdated, has it?" Ma La drew his gaze back to Ding Yupeng's face. The two old classmates seemed about to have a good debate on this issue. But Ding Yupeng didn't seem interested. He stared at Ma La's face and suddenly said, as if discovering something, "No wonder you so patiently listened to the old man nag all afternoon. I've discovered you two really do have similar personalities." "Similar how?" "Stubborn. In the words of party school teachers, this is the problem of dogmatism. Dogmatism harms both the country and people. What use is clinging to dogma? Always stand with the majority of laboring people. Fine to say it, but does it work in practice? The Communist Party now is not only the vanguard of the working class, but also the vanguard of all Chinese people. We don't just represent workers and farmers, but also advanced productive forces. Entrepreneurs are representatives of advanced productive forces, so of course we must protect their interests. This is called advancing with the times. But the old man doesn't understand this. He's suffered his whole life from being stubborn. Otherwise, with his credentials of joining the 8th Route Army in 38, how could he only be county level at retirement? That Deputy Governor Han is younger and has less seniority than the old man, but as fellow subordinates of Gu Feng, he's already at deputy provincial level. That's quite a gap. Ding Yupeng spoke convincingly, spittle flying onto Ma La's face. "You probably won't believe this, but from Education Bureau clerk to deputy county level, I didn't rely on the old man at all. He never pulled strings for me. All those old connections of his, old superiors, old comrades in arms, I connected with them myself. In the end, aren't they still his connections? Ma La couldn't help retorting. Ding Yupeng fell silent. After a long while, he muttered, "Anyway, the old man's life has been too frustrating." "I think the old man is quite lovable, really," Ma La said thoughtfully. "Old people like this are becoming rarer and rarer." "That's because he's not your dad," Ding Yupeng glared at Ma La irritably. The two old classmates looked about to start arguing when the car arrived at the county government entrance. The argument had to stop abruptly. Ding Yupeng punched Ma La's shoulder. "Since you like the old man so much, next time you come to the county seat, spend more time chatting with him." As they were parting, Ma La suddenly remembered something and asked Ding Yupeng, "By the way, do you know anything about Tang Lina's current situation?" Ding Yupeng looked at him sideways, half-jokingly, saying, "What, you want to go find our teacher's wife?" "No, I want to see Teacher Liu's child," Ma La said, lowering his eyelids. "I didn't think you'd still remember this," Ding Yupeng said, seeing his expression and no longer joking. "Go to the department store and find a company boss named Li Haijun. This person used to work at the County Cultural Center, played a mean Yang Qin, and was once Tang Lina's husband, though they later separated. But he should know Tang Lina's whereabouts. Find Tang Lina, and naturally you can find that child." Li Haijun. Why did this name sound so familiar? After parting with Ding Yupeng, Ma La went straight to the department store. The department store was right across from the cinema theater, also a 3-story building. It, too, had once been a landmark building of the county town. Although it now looked so low and unsophisticated, back in the day it was the busiest place in the county. Those who went to the cinema were generally town residents. Those who went to the department store to shop included both town residents and rural people, so naturally, it was more popular than the cinema. Back then, Kunpeng Company dug up its second bucket of gold from the department store. At that time, the company had just been established, and in Teacher Liu's words, it was in the stage of primitive capital accumulation. As general manager's assistant, Ma La carried a briefcase full of various contracts, following behind Teacher Liu, traveling north and south, gaining considerable experience. Initially, they focused mainly on small and medium cities, dealing with township enterprises, drilling around in mountain gullies. After one business trip, they'd both turn gray-faced like guerrilla fighters in movies, just missing pistols at their waists. Actually, doing business really was like fighting guerrilla warfare, taking shots here and there. Agricultural, industrial, and commercial trading company, the business scope included everything: timber, bamboo, hides, steel, coal, buying low and selling high. Using old terminology, this was speculation and profiteering. But commodity economy, Marx called this extracting surplus value, Teacher Liu would say, parsing words carefully like lecturing in a classroom. Every business trip, Teacher Liu's luggage always included 1 or 2 economics books, including Marx's Capital. Once on a train, while Teacher Liu went to the bathroom, Ma La picked up that copy of Capital from his seat and flipped through it, finding it full of horizontal lines, some passages with marginal notes. One section read, "The circulation of commodities is the starting point of capital. The production of commodities and developed commodity circulation, namely trade, form the historical prerequisites for the emergence of capital. As money, and as capital first differ only in their different forms of circulation. As the conscious bearer of this movement, the possessor of money becomes a capitalist. His person, or rather his pocket, is the point of departure and the point of return for money. The objective content of this circulation, value augmentation, is his subjective purpose, and only insofar as the appropriation of ever more and more abstract wealth becomes the sole motive of his operations does he function as a capitalist, or as capital personified and endowed with consciousness and a will. Use value must therefore never be looked upon as the real aim of the capitalist, nor must the profit on any single transaction. The restless, never-ending process of profit-making alone is what he aims at. This boundless greed after riches, this passionate chase after exchange value, is common to the capitalist and the miser. But while the miser is merely a capitalist gone mad, the capitalist is a rational miser. The never-ending augmentation of exchange value, which the miser strives after by seeking to save. His money from circulation is attained by the more acute capitalist, by constantly throwing it afresh into circulation. Teacher Liu had written a line beside it. How profound Marx's words are. Without understanding this, one cannot grasp the mystery of the commodity economy and will forever remain only a small merchant, never becoming a true entrepreneur, capitalist. Teacher Liu had also heavily circled the word capitalist 3 times. Ma La stared at these 3 little circles, pondering their meaning. When Teacher Liu returned from the bathroom and saw him dazed, he took the book from his hands and smiled. I've read Capital 3 or 4 times. Every reading yields new discoveries. This is our Bible for running enterprises. You should also read it carefully in the future, at least 3 times. He held up 3 fingers, speaking as seriously as if lecturing in a classroom. 1 communist manifesto, 1 capital. Whether we were doing socialism in the past or doing capitalism now, we can't do without them. Marx was truly great. We must catch up on our lessons properly. Time waits for no one. If we don't catch up, it'll be too late. Ma La interjected. We're not doing capitalism now. We're doing socialism with Chinese characteristics. Before he could finish, Teacher Liu interrupted him, waving his hand as if shooing away a mosquito, laughing heartily. About the same. Just different wording, that's all. In the past, in the classroom, whenever a student answered a question incorrectly, Teacher Liu would have the same expression. Before this former teacher, current boss, Ma La once again felt his own naivete and shallowness. It was also on that trip that Teacher Liu voluntarily chatted with Ma La about his family background. Teacher Liu came from a capitalist family. His grandfather had once served as director of the China Merchants Steam Navigation Company under Zhang Zedong. His father was the owner of Wuhan's largest shipyard. The ships their family built accounted for nearly half of all Yangtze River shipping. Teacher Liu's mother was his father's 3rd concubine. Before marrying into the Liu family, she had been a popular young female lead in Han opera at Hanku's Minzhong Theater. From the time he could remember, Teacher Liu rarely saw his mother and father together. He and his mother stayed in a European-style villa at the foot of Snake Hill by Xiaodong Gate in Wuchang. Besides an elderly servant, they rarely saw anyone else. Teacher Liu said it was from that time he developed his habit of loving to read. On the eve of liberation, his father fled with the family to Taiwan in panic, abandoning him and his mother. When leaving, aside from the villa they lived in, he left no other property. This was about all Ma La knew of Teacher Liu's family background, but from these fragments he concluded that Teacher Liu's career change into business was no whim, but something both inherited and gifted. This strengthened his determination to follow Teacher Liu and abandon teaching for commerce. Not long after, Teacher Liu dug up Kunpeng Company's first bucket of gold. Leveraging the Liu family's old connections in Wuhan, he obtained contracts for coal procurement and supply lasting 5 years for several provincial and central large-scale enterprises and institutions in Han. Carrying these contracts, they rushed non-stop to a coal mine called Liu Jiming at the junction of Hunan, Hubei, and Sichuan, signing coal purchase contracts at low prices. Half a year later, Kunpeng Company's assets jumped from the 3,000 yuan registration capital at founding to 500,000. With this first bucket of gold, Teacher Liu eagerly began planning to advance into larger fields. He set his sights on the then nearly bankrupt Yanhe County department store. At that time, the wave of privatizing county-level state-owned commerce was in full swing nationwide. Yanhe County's leaders probably also wanted to shed this burden early, so Teacher Liu acquired the department store's operating rights under Kunpeng Company's name for less than 50,000 yuan with almost no effort. The new department store was renamed Kunpeng Shopping Center. On opening day, the scene was unprecedentedly lively. Firecracker sounds echoed through half the county town. Leaders of the county's 3 major teams all attended. Teacher Liu, in a suit and tie with a plastic flower in his jacket pocket, delivered a brief but powerfully affecting speech at the ceremony. Many years later, Ma La still remembered his resonant voice. The giant ship Kunpeng Company has set sail. It will depart from here, reaching the entire province, the entire nation, even the whole world. We will certainly achieve our goal. We certainly can achieve our goal. From then on, the company's development entered the fast lane. Within a few years, Kunpeng Corporation's sign was hung in the provincial capital Wuhan and in Ni City, thousands of li away from Wuhan. No matter what, this was Kunpeng Company's Jinggang Mountain, the cradle of Teacher Liu's career. Ma La couldn't help thinking as he walked into the department store. The department store's layout was quite different from before. The first and second floors were sales areas, clothing, electronics, furniture, all sorts of things. Shops crowded one against another like pigeon coops, bustling and chaotic, suffocating. Perhaps because rentals weren't ideal, the third floor, originally also a sales area, had been converted into office space. The stairway to the third floor had an entire wall covered with company signs hanging unevenly. Fortunately, there were only a dozen or so companies. Ma La asked around, and without much effort found the person he was looking for in a company with just 2 rooms. "I'm Li Haijun." A man in a beige casual suit looked up from his computer, asking stiffly, "What do you want with me?" While Ma La examined this Li Haijun, long face, thick eyebrows, meticulously trimmed hair, looking not much older than himself, he worked hard to search in his brain. From the depths of his memory gradually emerged a familiar shadow. Teacher Li. "You are—" Li Haijun was somewhat stunned by this form of address. "I'm Ma La. I was your student when you taught at Shenhuangzhou Brigade Elementary School." Li Haijun said, "Oh," his expression changing rapidly. He stood up from the computer, stretching out a finger to point at him. "Ha! Ma La from Shenhuangzhou. I remember now, your grades were always in the top 3 in class, right?" Ma La smiled embarrassedly. "You also taught me to play the bamboo flute. I can still play Whipping the Horse to Rush Grain now." Right, I remember now. You had good comprehension. Got it right away." Li Haijun grasped Ma La's hand and gave his shoulder an affectionate punch, pulling him to sit down on the sofa beside them. He even personally poured him a cup of heated mineral water. "Didn't you win 3rd prize in the Commune Elementary and Middle School Arts Festival?" Ma La said, "Yes, the prize was a copy of Selected Diary of Lei Feng. Over 20 years in a flash. Since getting recruited to return to the city, I've never been back. Shenhuangzhou must have changed a lot, right?" Li Haijun looked at Ma La, saying with feeling, "You and your brother Ma Ke really do look exactly alike, just not as tall. He died so tragically, but, using the words of that time, his death was worthwhile. The County Youth League Committee issued a call for all county youth to learn from the good example of Comrade Ma Ke, a Jin Junhua-type model, including us sent-down youth." Seeing Li Haijun immersed in reminiscing about the past, Ma La didn't know for a moment how to state his true purpose to the other party. Ma La remembered that there were 2 groups of sent-down youth at Shenhuangzhou back then, one from Wuhan, one from Yanhei County Town. The 2 groups usually didn't get along and often picked fights with each other, even once having a mass brawl. As for this Li Haijun, he not only taught music for a while at Shenhuangzhou Elementary, but also caused quite a stir by dating the brigade's barefoot doctor, so Ma La had an especially strong impression of him. "By the way, Ma La, where are you working now? How did you find me?" Li Haijun brought the conversation back. Ma La felt this was an opportunity and explained his purpose. "So you worked with that guy named Liu?" Li Haijun turned his face to look at him. "How could you mix with an old lecher who seduced women everywhere?" His face showed disdain, even anger, his expression completely different from before, making Ma La somewhat embarrassed. He wanted to defend his teacher, but what came out was incoherent. "Please don't say that." After Li Haijun finally calmed down, Ma La carefully asked, "So, Tang Lina?" But before he could finish, Li Haijun rudely interrupted him. "Don't mention that whore to me. I've had such bad luck in this life. Not only did she get pregnant with someone else's bastard before marriage, after marriage she made me wear a cuckold's hat again. You tell me, could I keep living with her?" Li Haijun's spittle flew as he stood up from the sofa, pacing emotionally around the office. Because his voice was so loud, a female employee from the next room poked her head in to look, but Li Haijun waved her away with a rebuke. He hung his head and sat back down on the sofa, looking somewhat dejected, like a different person from before. After a long silence, he finally collected himself. He probably realized his loss of composure, wiped his face, looked up and said, "How about this? I'll give you an address. It's from several years ago when Tang Lina left before going to Wuhan after our divorce. Whether you can find her is hard to say." With that, he got up, found a notepad on his desk, wrote down an address, and handed it to Ma La. Ma La thanked him repeatedly. As they parted, Li Haijun saw him to the stairway, muttering, "When I have time, I'll definitely go back to Shenhuangzhou for a visit."